I'm opening this regular meeting of the Midcoast Community Council on September 13th, 2017. Will the council members please introduce themselves?
Dan Haggerty.
Brandon Kwan.
Chris Johnson.
Claire Tatat.
And Dave Olson, I'm vice chair. Lisa Ketchum, our chair, will not be able to be here tonight, so I'll be acting chair.
And I'm Don Horsley, the county supervisor.
And Don, you are up first in your regular role on reporting on county affairs,
Okay, well,
if any.
actually a couple of things. Just we did do last board meeting. Sort of sorry that Lisa's not here. We did have some interesting issues that she got to sit through. One of them was a development issue over in West Menlo, and it went on and on and on and on, and we finally made, I think, ultimately a pretty good decision. With the different in West Menlo, the issues really people are extremely sensitive, or very sensitive to trees, and there are it's an area that developed probably 40s and 50s, and some of the lots are really large. And by zoning, and some of them are capable of actually being subdivided, and it's really very controversial. I think we came up with actually a pretty good decision to be able to, but we have to do some other changes because one of the trees that was most sensitive, we came up, well, actually I came up with the idea of can't we just move the lot, give them some a variance so that they could save that particular tree. But it was just sort of interesting that I know on my website one time we had indicated that most of the disputed developments are in my district, and I think people thought that meant it's a lot of development on the coast side. They don't realize that I represent Woodside, Portola Valley, Atherton, Menlo Park, Belmont, San Carlos, parts of Redwood City. And so I have probably the greatest land mass, and as the most unincorporated, except the only district that has even something that's comparable would be District 4, where they have what's called North Fair Oaks. Other than that, all of the unincorporated for the most part is in my district. So we kind of changed that. There's lots of development. There are thousands of units being built on the bay side. But the real controversial ones that come to us tend to be in West Menlo, Menlo Oaks, parts of Redwood City, not necessarily on the coast. And in any case, so we also went on to do some mobile home protection. We actually have rent control on mobile homes or manufactured homes, and we went through big discussion basically on rent control. What we decided on was that there's rent control on the space. So the presumption is that most often the person owns the manufactured home, or maybe they, or could conceivably be renting from somebody else. But one of the reasons we wanted the space to be rent control is that there's so many people now who are using RVs or recreational vehicles as living units. And if we said that you could set the rate at market rate for RVs, that would push more of them than we are already seeing on city and county roads. So I pushed to make sure that we kept rent control on the space so that we don't have RVs. Well, we do have RVs on the street. It's one of our problems we have to, but I didn't want to see them more. And one of the things we were concerned about is that people who owned manufactured home places could, because they want to get away from, if they want to get out from under the rent control, would then encourage, or every time there's a vacancy, would turn that into an RV space that is not rent control. So the other thing we did with RV parks is we did not come to a final conclusion on it, but there are some disagreement. Well, I don't know if there's any disagreement, but we were discussing if the owner of the property wanted to redevelop it. Our desire is that all of it should be redeveloped for affordable housing, not market rate. Of course, the owners of the parks, of those properties, they want a combination of both market rate as well as below market rate, and we will have to decide what we do on that. On Gray Whale Cove, we did sign the MOU with the Transportation Authority And as we know, once we actually start some of the planning process, I did commit to having people from MCC as part of that. You know, there's some newer technologies that, for safer crossings, are called hawks. I don't know if you've driven on El Camino in the Atherton area, actually some parts of the unincorporated area. There are crosswalks, and a crosswalk has what's called a hawk. Essentially, it's like a stoplight. And so, you know, you've seen lighted crosswalks, I've seen in a lot of places, but the hawk is it's actually a step above that, in that it's essentially a red light that kind of hangs over the intersection. And when a person activates it, what happens is that at first it's a flashing yellow, then a consistent yellow, then it turns red. And the reason for that is you don't want it to, you know, go from nothing to all of a sudden red. So it gives people a notice that this is gonna change, that's gonna go from, there's gonna be somebody in that crosswalk. The other thing with the person in the crosswalk, we don't want them going in the yellow, we want them to wait until it's actually red and that folks stop. In any case, I'm gonna take a look at that. It's one of the potential iterations for Gray Willow Cove. The San Mateo County Parks is looking, we are opening a dog subcommittee with having community meetings. And I know how controversial that's been with GGNRA. And one of the things that kind of precluded me from getting too involved, I tried to do as much as I could in supporting local dog owners, was that, but I was precluded to some extent because GGNRA could always say to me, well, you don't allow dogs in your park. And I love dogs, and I have dogs. I walk my dog every morning, 2 of them. It's not actually on my Facebook. You oftentimes see my dog and my cat. And every time I have my granddaughter, this last time my granddaughter was over, and so I have a picture of the door, her bedroom door, and the dog is waiting for her to wake up. In any case, there's going to be, we'll give you more information. I think there have been a number of meetings already, and I think working on coming up with a different approach. I don't think we're ever going to allow off-leash dogs in our parks, and there's a reason for that. They scare other walkers. They scare wild animals. I don't know. Dogs they're dogs, and they'll see a deer or they see a squirrel, and off they go. So we're probably not going to allow that, but we probably will look at some other, have some greater flexibility.
And Chris is on the committee.
You're right. Okay, so you can report back on
Yeah, I'll have
that
an
later
announcement
when
about that later.
And then the last thing is that we did change the signage at the airport. We renamed it after Eddie Andrini Sr., and it was a dedication that was held last month. It was pretty heavily attended, and essentially that's the major thing. I do want to say I really want to appreciate Supervisor Dave Pine. We were really lucky to have Dave on the Board of Supervisors representing us, and really lucky that he is, he's such a detailed guy. He's the smartest of the 5 of us, probably. I don't know about that. But he is a former attorney. I guess still an attorney. Once you're a lawyer, you're always a lawyer. But he's really just a great representative for us, and really done a lot of work trying to deal with this next gen. And actually, he's really done yeoman work. Oftentimes they talk about Joe submitting in Santa Clara County, but the real work is actually done by people like Dave. And I also want to have a shout out for Kathleen Wentworth from Congresswoman Jackie Spears' office. Kathleen is a former United Airlines pilot, and has really helped us on. We have a real significant problem at San Carlos, and she has been working with Dave's subcommittee at the airport roundtable. And again, they have some great recommendations for the FAA, but it is a federal agency. And we'll see. I think we'll talk more about that tonight, so you get a flavor of the kind of recommendations that they're making and the difficulties as well. That concludes my report.
Thank you very much. Are there any other government board employees or
Questions?
Sorry, go ahead.
Thank you for your report, Don. With the MOU on Gray Willow Cove, Up in Pacifica, when Caltrans closed the Highway 1 and they rebuilt the bridge, I was at the meeting and they showed an animated visual of what they expected, how the traffic would react. So my question to you is, do you think it would be possible before we go too far that however, what type of signal or crossing that we do, that we can get some kind of a visual so that we're not reading through spreadsheets of numbers, the community could see a visual as to how whatever we put there would impact the flow of traffic on Highway 1?
We certainly could look at that, yes.
Okay.
Which reminds me, by the way, we have looked at, for example, we're asking to do some planning on roundabouts at Cypress. And so one of the things we have to do there is figure out, how much does it slow you down basically in traffic? Because one of the goals is actually to slow the traffic down, but not necessarily delay you to get to where you want to go. And what we've seen so far is that with a roundabout, traffic signal, you'd probably sit there for 1 or 2 minutes, but a roundabout only delays you by 20 seconds. So we do those kinds of iterations to look at, how does traffic stack up? And what kind of impact do you have? So yeah, we could do the same thing with Gray Rail Cove.
Great, thank you.
Any other council questions?
No, I have.
Okay, we'll get to that. Are there any other government employees or board members who'd like to speak? Okay, then we'll move on to council announcements. We'll start with Brandon.
Oh, hello, my name is Brandon Kwan, and these past 2 weeks there was Hurricane Harvey and Hurricane Irma that pummeled the southeastern shores, and it has affected me personally. I know many classmates and many friends, especially from my time living in Texas, who has been affected by these hurricanes, especially Houston was hard hit, billions and billions of dollars in economic damages, and it'll take many years to recover. And I'm really, really encouraged by the outpouring support from all across America, despite some grotesque political cartoons, but generally there has been a positive response that shows the American people are very empathetic and they really care, especially for other countrymen, especially in dire needs. And I would like to list out a couple of few charities that you might want to donate to. Anything would be great, even letters of thanks and supports. So some of the letters include the Convoy of Hope, the Houston Food Bank, Galveston Food Bank, the Save the Children for if you love children, the SPCA of Texas. There's also the Salvation Army, the Red Cross, and Catholics Charities, Habitat for Humanity. And if you want to know more, the Coastside Hope, our local charity for the coastside, they can direct you to more links. If you want to volunteer, they would know a lot more. And also the Half Moon Bay Chamber of Commerce would have many more connections as well. And I want to thank you for your patience.
Thanks for that, Brandon. I have a couple announcements. As Supervisor Horsley noted, San Mateo County Parks has a dog committee right now, and we're working on looking at dog management policy in San Mateo County Parks. Just in the parks, not elsewhere, but just in the park property. We've been working on this for about a year. We're currently in our public comment phase. We've got a working policy draft, and we've been having a series of public meetings for public to comment on that draft, to give us some course correction if we needed, whatever we didn't remember or something we left out. We're really trying to avoid the missteps of GGNRA, and I think we're doing a pretty good job. We've had 2 workshops last week in Burlingame and Redwood City. The third one is tomorrow night in Pacifica. It's at San Pedro Valley Park, 600 Oldstad, yes, it's an Oddstad. 600 Oddstad in Pacifica. The meeting's at 7 o'clock. If you're interested in dogs, if you have a dog, if you're interested in county parks, I highly recommend you check out the policy draft, and you can either submit your comments online or come to the meeting. I mean, it's really, we have all the members of the committee there. It's a public workshop, so we have, as Gigi iterated, we have the various stations. We have about 10 working sub-policies. We've got an overall policy statement, and then we've got 10 sub-policies to guide that overall statement. Those are set up as stations at the meeting with a member of the committee and county staff at each station to receive your input, to answer any questions. Attendance has been light so far, but Chair Neil Merrilee says that's a good thing. I'll take his word for it. He says that means that people are generally in agreement with the policies that we've developed. I would like to see more turnout just so that I know that people actually read it and they are involved. So tomorrow night, 7 o'clock Pacifica, after you get done at design review, seeing the design review hearings for the 4 Valimar properties, then you can come on up to Pacifica for the dog meeting. Another announcement I'd like to make is I've been approached by a couple of parents in the community. Local Boy Scout area troops, which are troops 255 and 263, they're desperately needing ideas for service projects for their senior scouts. The top 3 ranks of scouts, which is Star, Life, and Eagle, require service projects. Star and Life require participation of up to 6 hours in a service project. The Eagle Scout project, you have to develop the project yourself. You have to actually design the project. The lower level scouts can join on with an Eagle Scouts project and get marked off for their lower ranks. The Eagle Scout, while a Life Scout, must plan, develop, and give leadership to others in a service project helpful to your religious institution, school, or community. If you know of an organization like Coastside Hope, like Senior Coastsiders, like Granada Community Services District, that might have a need for some kind of community service project, and those could take the form of, in the past, and I know this is my Boy Scout manual from when I was Boy Scout. I did not do very well in the advancement, but I enjoyed it. I didn't make it to Eagle. But when I was a Boy Scout, the Eagle Scouts were doing they were erect a flagpole with maybe a plaque at the bottom in memory of somebody in the community. Building benches for people to relax and see the sights on. Painting utility boxes like a transformer box, painting it, red, white, and blue or something like that. Sorry. So those are the kinds of projects that we're looking for. And unfortunately out here, you need a coastal development project, a permit to, do anything over 18 inches that's going to be permanent. So I think they're really having trouble finding projects. So if you know of a project, if you know of an outfit that might need some help with this, I think the project these days could be something like if you know a senior who needs grab bars and a ramp for their house because they just had a stroke or they had an operation or something, I think that would qualify. If you know somebody like that, please contact the Troop Masters, and those email addresses are scoutmaster@troop255.org, scoutmaster@troop263.org, or you can email me, chrisjohnson_MCC@yahoo.com. It would really help our teens who are working towards that great achievement of Eagle Scout.
Anybody else have any announcements? Okay, I've got a few of my own. Chris already mentioned this. The Valimar Bluff 4-house project is at Coastside Design Review tomorrow at 2 p.m. In this same room. We have a county-run pre-application workshop for the Cypress Point Affordable Housing Community in Lost Beach. That's been set for Wednesday, September 20th, a week from today, from 6 to 8 p.m. at El Granada Elementary School, just down the street. The San Mateo County Parks master plan process is winding up. The 3rd community meeting is planned for this Saturday, a week from Saturday, September 23rd, from 9 to 12 noon, and this one is at Quarry Park. So it's an opportunity to see the plans, comment on them, etc. And then there's one other item. Granada Community Services District has a Citizens Park Advisory Committee, and they are looking for some volunteers to be on that committee. You can contact GCSD folks here in the office during business hours. With that, I think we're done with announcements. Does anybody have a public comment they would like to make for an item that is not on the agenda tonight? Okay, seeing none, I'll close public comment. I'm going to move on to the regular agenda. We're going to do this a little bit differently than MCC normally does. We have a number of presentations. There's a lot of information in them. So I'm going to ask that people hold off questions until all of the presentations have been completed, so we can get through them. It's possible that some of the presentations may already answer your question. So after that, we will take public comment and questions. Don, go ahead with the introduction.
Well, I think I already did, but I'm going to introduce Supervisor Dave Pine. He's actually our county's representative on the airport round table.
All right, thank you, Don. It's a pleasure to join you tonight. I've lived in the county since 1985, and coming over to the coast side has been one of the great things about living in San Mateo County, and we're over here all the time. My son and I just caught salmon actually last weekend. So this is a really special place, and Don does an unbelievable job working, looking out for the interests of the coast side. It's an amazing district. I'm often jealous of all the cool things he has, but I try to help him in any way I can, because it's one of the things that makes our county so great. So I just want to take a few minutes to introduce the topic tonight of airline noise and its effects here on the coast side. As Don mentioned, I am the County of San Mateo's representative to what's called the San Francisco Roundtable. And that's a group that was formed back in 1981 at a time when airplane noise was, the type of airplane issues were very different. The airplanes were considerably noisier. The folks in San Bruno, South City, Daly City, it was a big focus, and installation was put in by the Roundtable. Our installation program was spearheaded by the Roundtable, and then it's been in existence ever since to work with the airlines, the airport, and the FAA, and the community to try to deal with airline noise. So I have been serving for 6 years. As you'll see tonight, it's a super technical area. A lot of acronyms, a lot of jargon. It takes a lot of time to kind of get your head around it all. So we hope that we can at least start that process with you tonight. As the county's appointee, I do represent the county, and particularly the unincorporated county. So I do want anyone to call me, and I'm very focused on the issues of concern today, which is the Midcoast noise. So to start with, the challenge about this work is that federal law and actions taken by Congress over the last couple of decades have essentially removed local control from how airlines operate. So for time to time, you'll hear people say, well, let's just put a curfew in place. Well, federal law doesn't allow that. And basically, the FAA has almost unfettered control over planes when they're in the air, and where they fly, how many fly. They really do determine our fate. But that doesn't mean that we can't have an impact, and we are having an impact, as you'll hear tonight. But the challenge is it's really such a different sort of thing than I'm used to as a county supervisor, where we can pass an ordinance, or we can't do that in this area. So we have to operate in a very different way, through collaboration and persuasion. And as you'll hear, I think we're making some headway, but it's a long and trying process. So the crux of the problem, of course, is this implementation of the so-called next-gen air procedures. So until a few years ago, airlines, their navigation systems were based on ground-based radar. And the FAA has over the last number of years throughout the country implemented this new system, this next-gen navigation, which is a GPS-based navigation. And in doing so, they have changed a lot of flight paths, and they really, altered the routes, and it caused considerable, noise impacts to residents throughout the Bay Area. One particularly severe one that came up was all the way down in Santa Cruz, where a new flight path was put in. And literally hundreds of thousands of complaints poured into the airport about this new flight path. So things were so bad that, our congressional representatives, Congressman Spear, Congressman Eshoo, former Congressman Farr, they were on the FAA relentlessly about this, and eventually appointed a group called the Select Committee on South Bay Arrivals, on which I served. Concurrently with that, they also made it clear that the FAA needed to engage more seriously with the roundtable and again with this new Select Committee. So over the course of 6 or 9 months last year, there was an intensive study and involvement by both of these groups. And I've never seen anything like it, because in my prior 5 years, it was really hard to get the FAA to pay any attention. So, but thanks to the congressional involvement, they were very involved. In fact, the Western administrator, one of the most senior people, spent tens of hours in these meetings. So we had their ear. And the outcome of that process was there were 2 very substantial reports prepared with very, very detailed recommendations. So the first was by the roundtable, and thanks to Kathleen Wentworth, there's a series of recommendations, which she'll talk about some of the key ones, that were put forward to the FAA. And another set of recommendations were put forward by the Select Committee. And now they are beginning to respond to those recommendations and telling us which ones they think they can do. We continue to have dialogue with them, to really push on making some changes. The thing, again, it's so frustrating though, because they operate slowly, and any change they make typically takes 2 years, if not more. But again, on the positive side, the FAA has never been engaged, I don't think, anywhere in the country to the level they've been here. And we really wish that we could make something happen more quickly, but I do think I think we're on a path here that's going to make a difference. So maybe, I think at this point I should turn over to Kathleen to try to give you some sense for the specific changes that have been recommended and how they would help the situation here on the coast side when they are implemented. Because there's no denying that the coast side is a different place now because of these planes, and we think these recommendations will help, and we're on a path to get them implemented. So Kathleen, I'll let you take it from here.
As Supervisor Pine said, the FAA is in the process of responding to I think it's about 104 recommendations combined from the Select Committee and from the Roundtable. Some of them more important recommendations than other, but nonetheless the FAA is parsing each and every one. Not just reading them, but they are assigning them to staff to take a look at them and decide if each of these recommendations is, if an airplane can fly that particular request, if it can be sandwiched in among a bunch of other layers of traffic in the Bay Area, if it's otherwise safe, and if it connects to other outbound flight paths. So there are a number of things that they're researching. And they have given us an interim report that came out last month, I guess, or in late July, I believe. And in that report, they have evaluated and categorized about half of the recommendations. And so we still have another 50% of the recommendations yet to be categorized. And so those are still under evaluation. And we expect that report, the FAA is a little cagey and they won't give us a date exactly, but we have a commitment that it will be given into the Congress members' hands by the end of fall. It's still a ways off, and we're hoping it will be nowhere near that long, but they're kind of busy doing a lot of other things right now with Phoenix and everything else going on. So in order to understand some of these recommendations, and I'm only going to talk about two that affect the coast right now. There are more than two. One of the ones I'm going to talk about has been determined to be feasible. The other is still under evaluation. But before I talk about the recommendations, let me just give you a brief overview, if I may, so that you get an idea of what we're talking about. If I can get this working. As you can see, this is a map of the Bay Area. San Francisco here, San Jose down here, Oakland up here. The airports are Oakland, right under that N-E sort of. San Francisco is right there, and San Jose is down there, but it doesn't have, it's not much of a player for most of our issues. As you may know, in the past, let me just briefly say, and I think Bert's going to take this up later, San Francisco has 2 north-south runways and 2 east-west runways. And the north-south runways take off, for our purposes, what we care about is the left hand of those north-south runways take off, go here, and come down to port. Sorry for the jiggly, it's not the best situation. But they'll take off from here, go up to this cart stick, and then they'll make a turn, and then they'll come down to port. Now, sometimes that turn will be quick. Right after SEP, they'll go straight down. Sometimes they'll come out here, sometimes they'll go down there, sometimes they won't turn till here. So basically, anywhere around here, they'll start a left turn, and the turn may be direct to port, or it could be over a little bit and then down, all depending on the traffic in the area and the controllers keeping those traffic separated from each other. So in the past, before NextGen, which took place in late 2014 and early 2015, in the past, most of those flights were flying a slightly different route, well, a significantly different route. That was they'd take off and they'd go up to this little brown, I think it's brown dot septi, not very far from this blue dot stick, which is your current turn point. But they, after they turned, they would very often come in this way to port, instead of going smack down this way. So the aircraft generally still arrived at port, but sometimes they would come a slightly different path, and it would be an infinite number of paths. That's what I have to tell you. There is no one, there's a path on paper, yes, but that's not controlling. What's controlling is the controller saying, I gotta turn this airplane now because I got somebody else coming here. So one of the saving graces of this north departure, and I'm talking about previously now, that went up here and eventually got down here is that a certain percentage of those departures, and I'm sorry I don't know the exact percent, but I'm going to call it about 15%. It's a small minority of them, would instead go here, would go over here to this white line sort of, and then go down and wind up here, and then take a track south, completely bypassing port and most of the coast. And these were a limited number of airplanes. These were primarily airplanes that were headed for destinations on the coast. Santa Barbara, Santa Ana, Orange County, San Diego, Long Beach, there may be 1 or 2 more. But that was a particular route that was determined that kept them off the coast, and then they'd go down to off the coast in LA. So the FAA, 2 years ago, when they decided in their infinite wisdom that they're going to make these routes more efficient, decided to fold in this nice offshore route into the other route and give it a new name called STIC. So now, for the most part, we don't have this offshore route anymore. It's still on the books, but it's not being used for hardly at all, very, very little bit. So one of the recommendations from the roundtable is to create this path that is a long-standing path that goes like this and goes like this and down, recreate that for the satellite generation airplanes. Just recreate it. And it seems like a very good recommendation. It is still being evaluated. Part of the problem is that the outbound flights from port coming down here have a sort of like a freeway, several off-ramps, and so they'll have to find a way to connect that to the next gen. I have confidence they can work that out. So that's a recommendation that I think will bring some bit of relief. Now, remember I said that only about 15% of the airplanes previously flew that, so that's only at best 15% of relief.
Is that 15% of the aircraft that fly over?
No, it's, well,
15%
it's-
of the total
So,
aircraft?
can I ask that you hold all questions until the end of the presentation?
Yeah, they're not gonna be
Just
relevant.
hold on to it.
Remind me, and I will get back, I can answer that for you, sort of. So that's a very promising recommendation for a small subset of flights, to put it back where it was before. On a totally different recommendation is the type of flying that happens in the nighttime hours, which I think for most people that we hear about is the most troublesome. And just, you know, the kids can't sleep, you can't sleep, it's tough. And it's a complaint we hear from everybody all over the place. It's horrendous. So this at nighttime, this same procedure takes place. They go up here, they have some version of flying over here and winding up down here. And they might go this way, and it's all over the place. It's very disruptive. The recommendation from the roundtable is that during the nighttime, when flight volume is tremendously reduced, nighttime probably is not 10 o'clock at night, because that's not a reduced volume time, unfortunately. It's still nighttime, but it's not a reduced volume time. But during reduced volume times, the aircraft controllers can look at alternate routing, be a little more creative, be able to do something different. And what they have come up with is an RNAV, it's a long-standing Rebus departure, but it takes the airplanes, instead of going here and going down here, they go from the runway, essentially to this blue dot, to this blue dot, to this blue dot. And then, that's called the night waypoint. At that point, and here's the tricky part, they can go north or they can go east. What happened to south? Which is what we care about, right? There is no route right this minute, currently south off of the night. There just isn't one. It wasn't designed that way. So this was a recommendation that the roundtable recommended that the flights follow the same blue dotted line and have an option here to go from night out to this place called Gobbs intersection and then down the ocean to a yet undetermined point, but over the ocean. And the FAA has said, yes, this is feasible. This can be done. So this is one of the things we're focusing on right away as soon as we can. And right away means we're just starting on it right away. Because the FAA process, believe it or not, can take a good 2 years from brilliant idea to on paper pilots flying the procedure. And that seems absurd, but there is an enormous amount of safety vetting that needs to happen. They go out and test fly these routes. It's an incredible process, but it is a time-consuming process. We are hopeful that it might be less than 2 years, only because we're only asking for an addition from here to here and here to somewhere in the ocean. So maybe that will help out on the timeline just a little bit. And that is feasible, been determined feasible, and we're just waiting for the final report to come out to start to initiate that process. And then a new procedure will be filed, a new transition will be filed to this and to some other waypoint. But I do need to stress, I don't want to have you think that it will be available from 10 p.m. to, I'd like to sleep till 9 some mornings, but it's not. Well, I would, I'd like to. So you can understand, and I know you guys do, that during the day, a lot in San Francisco, at San Francisco Airport, we get low ceilings, cloudy, fog. And when that happens, airplanes in Denver and, way everywhere sit on the ground waiting for their turn to come in so that they can then turn and go out again. Those airplanes who thought they were going to leave at 9:30 in the night, they're not. They're going to leave at 11:30, 12 o'clock, however late it needs to be. And so the definition of nighttime is really not what time the clock says, but when the traffic volume has decreased to a point where there are less airplanes that can do this single file up this way and out, or up this way and here. So the controllers do it very, very well when they're able to do it, but just so you know. So I think that's a very important change, and I think the roundtable, and I know my Congresswoman Spear is focusing tremendously on the nighttime hours, because I think that's that's where we hear people say that's important. That's the most important to my family. I'm not going to say I can take questions because I know we'll do that later. Anything else for me to cover?
Those are the two most important.
Okay, so we'll talk more Q&A.
My name is Bert Ganong. I'm the Aircraft Noise Abatement Manager for San Francisco International Airport. Wanted to take this presentation. I was asked to do sort of a noise 101 in addition to getting folks up to speed with it, because I know that most of you in the area are not as down with airport noise as the folks on the other side of the hill. Not that they're down with it either. They don't appreciate it. So I did want to go through that. Real quickly, wanted to jump through some tracks that we had for Kathleen here. One of the procedures that she didn't touch on, but does a similar thing to our stick, is the Oakland candle. The FAA was very creative when they named these. Get it? Candle, stick. So they are very creative. And so you can see these procedures, which are daytime, along with SFO's stick, do come down and mirror each other when they're heading for port. The item that we didn't touch on terribly was the density of these tracks. Frequency and density is what we're really focusing on, is quality of life issues. We're finding out from people, they would say, I can take, one or two, I'm fine with that, but when it starts to become 3, 4, 5, you're darn right, I'm going to send in a noise report. This is the nighttime that we were talking about. Out of Oakland, it's known as the hush. Out of San Francisco, it's known as the night. The spur would be to get one out here to Gobs. Real quickly, how much time do I have? I can...
As much as you think you need.
Okay, well, I want to allow plenty of time for questions, so I will go through this relatively quickly. If anybody wants, I can jump back. Is that fair with you? So, real quickly, our mission is to serve as a link between the airlines, the FAA, the community, the electeds, everybody. We're the middlemen. We also gather a ton of information. And so with that information, we try to make sure that everybody has that information and can then make good decisions and go forth. We are somewhat shackled in what we can do by legislation, and I'll show you that in a little bit. It's called ANCA, the Airport Noise and Capacity Act. Lots of acronyms in aviation, so bear with me. I will try to catch them as they come and spell them out. We were the first to do a noise compatibility program study in 1983. SFO was the very first airport to do that. Very concerned for our local citizens, and also trying to work with our community. So it's one of our good things. Locally, we've done mitigation within the noise contour. I'll show you a noise contour in a moment. It's basically very close into the airport. We did an early phase out of older, noisier aircraft. So in 2000, the Federal Aviation Administration had told the airlines they want them to get away from the older, noisier Stage 1, Stage 2 aircraft and be all Stage 3 fleet by then. And we'd been pressing for the airlines to do it before then. And we were successful at it. We had a 98% rate in, I believe it was 1998. And we're the first to do a aircraft noise management system with flight tracks. Started that in 1975, along with noise monitors to report in. We've had a very nationally recognized and worldwide recognized study and process with our community in working with aircraft noise. It's also good for the land use compatibility zoning, working with the local cities. As most of you may not know, but San Francisco Airport is an island of San Francisco within San Mateo County. So it's very unique in that aspect. So many cities that have airports, it's a direct relationship. Ours, we kind of have an interesting relationship in the way we have to work with folks. Our community noise exposure level, we have been able to reduce our noise contour with newer aircraft and through mitigation. And 1976, the airport affected 35,000 people locally within the contour. And I'll explain more about the 65 decibels on that one. So what is our structure? How do we do it? Quieter planes. The airlines, when they're doing well, they're able to buy quieter planes and use those. Helps out the community. I can give you a little bit of an early roundtable hint. You'll find at our next roundtable meeting we're going to announce that Southwest Airlines is phasing out their older 737-300s, about 60 some odd airplanes if I recall right, and that will be in October. And United Airlines will be parking their 747s about the same time frame. So the old 747-400, 4-engine, double-deck jet that United flew, no more. Working with communities, items like this. I relish being able to go out in the community and talk with people. It is one of the best ways we get the word out. Last weekend, we were at the Palo Alto Airport with Airport Day, talking with the local community about aircraft noise. On the 30th of this month, we'll be at San Carlos Airport talking with the community. Yes, it is an airport-friendly environment, but we have a lot of folks in the community that come there to ask questions. Why is the airport here? Why does this happen? Why does this? And so we're able to answer those, and it's good for everybody, I think. Land use planning and mitigation. SFO is a great planning department. We try to work very hard with the local planners to see if we can do anything that will affect the citizens there, such as the city planning to build something that is not the best use of an area, or better mitigation when they do build it, if they decide to build there. And then our noise program. We continuously monitor our flight operations, Bay Area wide, you'll see in a moment. And we work with the FAA on a regular basis. I have a twice-monthly meeting with our tower manager, and I also talk with the TRACON manager. The FAA's airspace is a little divided up, so locally at the tower goes out to about 5 nautical miles. And then beyond that to 18,000 feet is the Terminal Radar Control Facility, which is actually located in Mather near Sacramento. And then beyond that are centers, which are much higher altitude, much further distance. Just kind of a structure of the Aircraft Noise Abatement Office deals with the federal agencies, community, airlines, elected officials in the aviation industry. And here's some of the groups that we work with. And this is our museum at SFO. It's replicated after the old Mills Field terminal. And we do have our meetings here occasionally. Our noise management system, here's the inputs that we have. We take in our digital audio logging for the radios. Noise monitors, we have 29 in the community and 4 on the airport. Weather comes back via DSL connections to our system. The radar data and our noise report data, and then portable noise monitors. And I'll talk to you about that in a moment. Comes into our server, out to our desktops, and with our output we can do reports, our GIS compatibility information for noise mitigation, put up information on the website so we stay current. And I'll give a plug for that in a little bit. Noise contours, and then we have a display room in our front room at the airport. What is noise? Noise is unwanted sound, basically. It's subjective. What may bother one person may not bother another. You'll find sometimes when you talk to a neighbor about something, a leaf blower, a Harley, whatever, neighbor says, I don't know, it's never bothered me. And you might say, why is that? It bothers the heck out of me. It's subjective. It may affect different people differently. So you find when you ask people about it, it's that. It's hard to relate sound and sound levels to annoyance with people. Scientists have tried to do it. The FAA is right now trying to redo it, recategorize it, make sure that they're doing it right. We can't measure perception of noise. We can measure noise levels, though. And so just to give you an idea, the percentage of people highly annoyed, this is from the Schultz curve. It was done quite a while ago, but it's being refocused now. So here's an aircraft curve, roadway noise curve, and a railway noise curve. I don't always agree with these because different groups you'll find, such as Atherton, may be more bothered by railway than aircraft, and vice versa. So
No,
is
everything.
yes, sir. How do we measure it? Well, decibels is basically a way of quantifying sound pressure. And it's any pressure level the human ear can detect. So it's a ratio from sound pressure to a reference. And the interesting thing about it is it's logarithmic, so we're talking really huge numbers, really, but we compress it down to smaller numbers that we can deal with. And the frequency range the human ear deals with at best is the A-weighted spectrum. And so some examples of noise at the top end, 25 meters from a jet engine at takeoff would be about 140. Rock concerts, you're talking 110 to 125, somewhere in there. Construction sites, roughly 100 decibels. Noisy workplaces can get up around 85, 95. Average street traffic in a larger area is about 80. A busy office is probably about 65, 70. As I'm talking to you right now is about 65 decibels. An alarm clock 3 feet from your head is about 80 decibels. Vacuum cleaner, same noise levels, is sort of what goes on. And when you get down to the rural areas, Woodside, Portola Valley, we're talking 30, 34 decibels. It's quiet, really quiet. And this area is a little above that. So what affects our level of annoyance? Let's start over here at time of day. Well, as was mentioned earlier, sleep. Folks like to sleep, and that recharges our batteries. It's a good thing to do. So background noise at night is typically lower than daytime. And then when you get into your physical environment, you may find your vegetation around your area can absorb sound levels. Also too within your house, if you have a very minimalist house with glass, wood, and metal, it's going to reverberate noise much better than if you had some carpet and some draperies. Those absorb the noise. Another thing that really bothers them is the predictability about it. So people like predictable. They can deal with that. When it's unpredictable and they have the surprise effect, it's bothersome, and it makes them come out of their skins. They also like to be able to control it, and it's not always controllable when you can't put your finger on it and say, make it go away. So emotions, people say noise is unnecessary. Well, if you're in the airplane and you're flying along, you probably think it's necessary because you want the airplane to go and not come down out of the sky. So it's relative there. And then longer noise exposures equal higher annoyances. So that's the frequency length. So an aircraft in flight and on the ground has similar noise sources. So on the ground, it would be the auxiliary power unit, which is a small jet engine in the tail of the aircraft, powers the electrical and air conditioning systems. In flight, we have speed brakes, slats, which are on the leading edge of the wing. We have wingtip vortices, which are the horizontal tornadoes that come off of the wing. The engine core noise, the jet exhaust noise, thrust reversers at the airport, which is that loud noise you hear when you land. The fan blades, the newer engines have much quieter fan blades, and they're really interesting shape versus just a paddle. The engine nacelle, the whole can here, it can affect the aircraft noise. And the landing gear, once they lower it, also is a noise source. So just wanted to kind of show you here, we were talking about the 737-300 earlier, so it's right in between these two, but closer to this one. So we see the older 737-100 and 200s, very loud aircraft. And we're looking at the 95 decibels at the hottest, 85 a little further out, 75 further out. As the aircraft have gotten newer, the noise levels have come down more. The one I don't have here is the current generation, the 737 MAX, and it's about a quarter quieter than this one. So it's still getting quieter. Another thing on the historical record is we're noticing that as traffic growth has gone up in the populations, the noise of people that are exposed to the levels have decreased by about 95%. And that isn't a big factor to most people, especially when you're sitting at home and being bothered by it, but I just wanted to show you that one. How does noise get into your house? Through thin doors, not solid core doors, cracks, windows that are substandard windows or don't have the extra environmental efficiencies, through the walls that don't have good insulation in them, the attic as well, and your chimney. If you don't have the chimney dampener, noise can come down that way as well. So we talk about community noise equivalent level, or CNEL. And that takes into all the aircraft noise and all the community noise over a 24-hour period and averages it. Many people say, well, that's unfair. When you actually look at it, it's actually a very fair method of computation for it, because it looks at the evening period, and in California, adds a penalty to it of 5 decibels approximately. And then at nighttime, we add a 10 decibel penalty to it, which makes up for the sleep. Now, it doesn't make up for it completely, but in the mathematical calculations, it takes that into account. So roughly that one aircraft that flew over is counted as 10. Single event noise exposure level is a way of taking that sound energy and putting it into a figure that is comparable. So we're talking sound energy within this area over a time period versus the L max. So the max is just what peak level it achieved. Now, how are we comparing these noise levels? Well, we take the energy over time and we put them all into the same value. So we're apples and apples at this point. I know I'm losing some of you, but just bear with me on this one. So we're going to show you a sound exposure level here of this aircraft flying over. And when you look at it here, you say, well, wait a minute, the L max is 90. What we've done is taken the rise and the fall, or the total duration of this event, above a limit, so let's say 80, just for the reference here. And for the duration it went on for, which is approximately 30, 40 seconds, it becomes 100 decibels under this single event level. We're getting into the measurement of it. So here's a permanent site of ours. We have the electronics down here, a break apart mass, so we can do the maintenance on it, microphone and weather gear at the top. And when we do portable noise monitoring, which we're actually doing nearby here, we have one in Montero right now at a residence. So we have the electronics over here in the suitcases and the battery, and then we have the microphone out here in a tripod. So these are fairly short term. You can do them for 2 weeks. If you do it once a quarter for 2 weeks, the state of California says that it's the equivalent of a permanent site. You can come up with the same values, or very similar. So with that, I'm going to show you a noise exposure map right here. These dots here with numbers on them are our permanent noise monitoring sites. Most folks say, well, gosh, why don't you have them all over the peninsula? Well, first of all, they're not cheap. Second of all, the purpose of the noise monitors near an airport are to validate a noise contour. And you can see they basically follow the shape of the noise contour. And when we get into this, we're looking at a year's worth of time. Here's a better picture of the noise monitors. I'm missing a couple down here in Redwood City. And then we're looking at this green line here, this green bordered line here. That's our 65 decibel noise contour. This would be a 60, and the purple is 55 decibels. At that point, we're really blending into the community noise. So it's really hard to pick out what's airplane noise, what's community noise. We do that by pulling in flight tracks to our system when we have a noise event, and then we match the noise event to the flight track. And so we're able to do that very well, but when it starts to get down that low, it's almost impossible. Cars, leaf blowers, busy areas on the peninsula, where most of these monitors are located, it gets difficult anything below that. So we have a zero impact area within our noise contour, 65 decibels at SFO. We've done that through mitigating. We've mitigated over 15,000 homes, 8 schools, churches, and places of worship. And so in doing that, people say, okay, so you're resting on your laurels. No, we're not. We do the contour once a quarter to make sure that it's not growing. And if it is, we'll address that right away. So we try to address noise source reduction at the airport, and also working with airlines for quieter airplanes. We perform our noise abatement procedures and our regulations through the operating restrictions, such as at the airport, which doesn't affect you very much. So if you're nearby, it would. The engine's running in the APU, the auxiliary power unit, instead of running the plug-in that we have for preconditioned air and electricity, which is helpful to reduce that nearby. And land use planning and management, so working with the local communities to not put something under a direct departure route would be profitable in that area for both. So the Airport Noise and Capacity Act of 1990, this was a congressional act, and with that, the airport did notice that, well, we were able to get rid of our older, noisier aircraft by 2000, as I mentioned earlier. They established it now as called Part 161, or the Federal Aviation Part 161. And it does allow for the airport to try to implement restrictions. To date, that rule is so tough, there has not been a successful one implemented. Restrictions cannot be discriminatory, unreasonable, or unduly burdensome to interstate commerce, nor can they impede the FAA's execution of the National Stage 3 transition. They've gone beyond that now. They're on to Stage 4 and 5. So we're hoping that's a window where we can actually say, okay, now that we have Stage 4 and 5, can we now get some of these restrictions? The Part 150 funding for the noise insulation program is done through this and can actually be used to fund these type of things. The Airport Noise Capacity Act does not affect any airport noise or access restrictions in effect before November 5th of 1990. That's why San Jose Airport has a curfew, and San Francisco and Oakland airports do not. And then we have our noise compatibility program, which I mentioned earlier, that was beneficial to the community, that we started that as the first airport to do that. Okay, noise abatement. How do we make it quieter? Well, we have our Part 150 noise compatibility plan. We have our noise regulations at the airport. We work with air traffic control, and we work with the airport community roundtable. And our point is we're right here in the middle. We're trying to get everybody together and talk. We use runway use and departure and arrival procedures, but safety is first. You all have to agree with that, I'm sure. You want it to be a safe system. Much of it's voluntary, and we are seeking regulation changes right now. So here's SFO. We're looking at it from out over the bay. Most of our arrivals come in on runway 28 to the west. Just a real quick one, most people don't know this. Runway numbering is actually based on the compass. So if we look here at 19 left and right, which faces south, that's 10 degrees off of 180. The last digit is dropped. So we're looking at southerly runways. One right is 10 degrees off, so we're looking at almost northerly. 28 is almost 270, so we're looking at westerly. And 10 left and right are easterly facing runways. Our departures typically go off on runway 1, 80% of the time, 85% of the time, and our arrivals are almost 99% of the time on runway 28. Very beneficial to the community in that we have a bay that we can fly over as much as possible. Here's two, I guess for lack of a better word, cartoon images of our traffic flows. This is what's called West Plan and Southeast Plan. West Plan for all the Bay Area airports is generally this. It's not exactly this, but it's generally a good idea of what happens. For example, this arrival here does not come out here. It actually goes overhead SFO and then comes out, just so you know what goes on there. The San Jose Loop 9 departure does not go so wide out here. It's actually a racetrack pattern, and it goes out that way. When the winds and the weather comes in and things reverse, our arrivals typically come up like this over the Berkeley Hills and into SFO, and our departures typically will go out over the bay and then come back around and out or across the peninsula. West Plan is 95% of our operations. We have a Fly Quiet program. It's a voluntary program. Its purpose is to encourage the airlines to fly quietly. We grade them on multiple spectra, including the fleet choice, the use of the procedures such as nighttime preferential runway, and other items that we do. and we give it to the media and publicize it, and we have the public meetings, and then annually we have awards for the quietest flyer, most improved, and the Chairman's Award. Chairman's Award generally goes to the airlines working the hardest with the Noise Abatement Office for change. Airspace modernization. So we're talking about next gen right now. This is the FAA's program that's mandated by Congress, and it was to modernize our aging air traffic control system from an old radar-based system to a satellite-based system. So collaborative air traffic management, improved approaches with low visibility operations, multiple runway, improved surface operations, on-demand national airspace information, performance-based navigation, which is more precise, GPS, separation management, so they can actually put more airplanes in the sky and know exactly where they are. Time-based flow management is an outfeed of this, which means eventually the FAA will know when you leave your gate, each second along your route of flight where you'll be, all the way to the other gate. Metroplexes are areas of airspace. For example, ours went from Monterey out to Sacramento. The LA Basin, most of you are kind of familiar with that already, so you know that. We had Las Vegas, Phoenix, we're talking Denver, and then the 2 Texas airports with Houston and Dallas, Atlanta, Florida, and the others. 21 total. And basically what they're doing is they're looking to have satellites and the airplanes talk to each other. And they'll know exactly what's going on the entire procedure. Wanted to jump onto this one. So we're looking at August 2014, the entire month of August for the Bay Area. And then we're comparing it to August 2017, post-Metroplex. This is pre-Metroplex. One thing I want you to notice is the concentration of the flights. They aren't as fanned out. So here, we notice over this area, we notice the blue color come in. We're having denser concentration of flight tracks than we had here. On our departure here, up here, out and over the bay, the Golden Gate Bridge, we had a few before. Now we have many more. So that attempts to keep the folks, the air traffic off the folks in the peninsula, which is helpful. But this concentration is what we're really focusing on, as well as Oakland's Candle departure. These are problematic for us. And under the initiatives that the FAA are working on right now, we're hoping that we can get movement on the port, out offshore, more of the procedures out and over the bridge, until the point where we could be impacting other communities. We have to be very careful about that. We don't want to shift noise. It's not fair. This one, let me see if I can get it to work for us. I have an animation on this one. And come on. Doesn't want to work. Oh, no. Oh, shoot. So I wanted to show that to you. We had our noise report, time lapse from 2010, and you can see the bloom as the amount of folks were reporting to us, mainly Palo Alto, through Santa Cruz, in the city of San Francisco, and then some on the coastal communities. I don't know why it's not working, but I wish it did. Sorry about that. Move on to the last few. We do have our references and links. We have an excellent webpage at flyquietsfo.com. We have a flight tracking ability there, so you can use that for 3D flight tracking. You can pan, tilt, zoom, see what's going on, see what may have bothered you. You can actually click on an aircraft, measure how far it was from your house. A lot of research tools right there available to the community. And it's sprung out because the community said they wanted that. We're the first airport to do that. To give us noise reports or concerns, we have an online forum here, and you can get through there at flyquietsfo.com. You can send us an email, sfo.noise@flysfo.com, and then we also have our hotline, 650-821-4736. And I think that'll do us. Open to questions.
All right. Dawn or Dave, do either of you want to summarize anything before I open it up for questions?
I
maybe to help the use remarks give kind of people a sense of the complexity of what we're dealing with. But I think it's
All right. And I will say I forgot to bring the speaker slips, so just raise your hand if you want to ask a question. I'm going to ask that you go up to the podium so the video will pick up your
Dave?
question.
I just want to emphasize one thing, that ANCA Act was in 1990. And, that's, anything be after 1990 really precludes local jurisdictions from imposing certain regulations. And specifically, anything that's discriminatory or noise. So I know oftentimes people think that somehow we as local government can do something. Most of what Bert has talked about is really voluntary. It's hopefully if you get the regulatory agency, FAA, to make changes, that's the best that we could do. But again, it's really voluntary. Even though, the pilots, if they choose to fly directly over Half Moon Bay, they can do that. So we cannot control what happens in the air, but we have, I think they've made, as much progress as they possibly can. And it looks like there's some other recommendations that hopefully, if they're able to implement, could make a significant difference.
Yes. All right.
Can I ask, since we don't have speaker slips, to get things into the minutes, if you go up and give your name, could you also spell it?
Okay.
Thanks.
Dave?
Yes. I'm going to let the audience go first, and then we'll go to the council.
Okay.
So go ahead, go up to the podium, give us your name and the town you're in.
Laszlo Veszprémi, Mass Beach. And I'm a pilot myself, not a commercial pilot like Kathleen, but I'd like to give you a 15-second slide here, which is very brief. We are here in El Granada, which is ground zero for port. Port is right over our heads. And there is a single problem which Kathleen and others refer to is port needs to go back over the ocean, or needs to go over the ocean. This is one of the proposals, by the way, from the roundtable, and is still being considered by the FAA. Prior to 2015, the red line, planes were vectored, dispersed widely over the ocean. Since 2015, GPS and NextGen brings everything down in the pencil narrow lane over El Granada, Half Moon Bay, and in effect, every 3-4 minutes you have an airplane flying overhead, which means a continuous noise, because once the noise stops from one airplane, the second follows. So this is really sad, because there is absolutely no reason whatsoever to have port over El Granada. There is none. And just because some bureaucrat in Seattle or Washington decided that this is the nicest way to run, they could just as well have port over the ocean, and that would be the solution that solves 95% of our problem. Two more things. The city of Half Moon Bay had a meeting on August 4th, and they voted that to reach out to FAA and ask exactly this. The city of Pacifica had a meeting on August 16th, also with a similar conclusion, asking to send a letter to Congressman Jackie Speier and the FAA to ask port to be moved. Again, this would solve most of our problems. The only question I have here is that since we have Half Moon Bay and Pacifica on board, would the county of San Mateo be interested to join this group in supporting our goal or not? It's a very simple yes or no question. Thank you.
I think it'd probably be helpful for Kathleen to talk a little bit about port, and then we can come back to Mr. Briscoe.
Bert, could you give me the Bay Area with the colored dots on it, please? Laszlo makes a very good point. It needs a little bit of elaboration, however, I think, to fully understand it. And that is, let me get there.
Might be helpful to explain those points a little bit, you know, where they came up, who decides where they are, what elevations they are, the purpose,
Okay,
significance.
be happy to do that for you. Okay, so going back to this slide again, let me put my glasses on so I can see what I'm pointing at. Again, we're talking about the flights that are coming down this way to the port intersection. And these come from basically 3 different sources. They come from runway 1 left that comes up here over the blue dot, comes down currently and goes right like that. They also can come from the Oakland Airport, which basically,
Oops. Is that better?
yeah, sure, that's good. They can come from the Oakland Airport and come down this way to port. And if you go back to the other slide now, just for a sec. Oh, it's not that easy, sorry. They also can come from a runway 28 departure that can go down to port. Now, the suggestion to move a waypoint, here's port, suggestion to move it 20 miles west, some would be somewhere out here. And for those aircraft that are heavy, that require the use of runway 28 for takeoff, which is this right here, and they would normally, if they're going south, would then go down this way to port and go south. For those aircraft, making them come out here to a moved port, no brainer. Yes, that's what the roundtable's looking at, absolutely. Now, it's a little bit trickier for those aircraft that are coming from Oakland and coming off of the ones. And that is because depending on where you move this and depending on how you draw the path, you have the potential for, especially off the ones, coming up here, and then what do? Do you go right over here? And if you go right over there, you're affecting a whole new communities that are not currently under it. Okay, well, maybe we go here and we go, halfway out and then down. And now we're still affecting Pacific new communities. So it's not, having the waypoint out here is a non-issue, except for the fact that we've got to get airplanes from here up over to the ocean in some way, shape, or form. And how you do that and which communities you fly over that are not currently being flown over is making a big noise shift to people who aren't expecting it. Not to say that there isn't a solution, but it's not a simple solution. And it's a solution that the San Francisco Roundtable will have to take on, see if there is a pathway that makes more sense. Go back, there's an existing pathway that worked for the offshore departure before, but that was only for 10–15% of the flights, not 100% of the flights.
Aren't there a number of pathways that, I fly regularly as a vessel. There seems to be lots of pathways that go.
There are lots of pathways, and there is generally a written, printed pathway that exists for most of these procedures. However, because of the way the traffic is heavy and airplanes are coming all over, controllers generally don't have to follow that exact pathway. They have a lot of leeway, and that's the kind of different paths you're seeing. So yes, there's a way to possibly disperse the traffic. All of that not by saying it can't work, just by saying that it's not as simple for the majority of flights that we're looking at. They're fine for those that come off this way. For the 2.8s, they're on an established pathway, and you can put them down anywhere you want in the ocean. Doesn't matter. Won't matter to anybody, right? Because they're over the ocean. But for those folks that are coming off this way and making a turn here, 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 wherever it's going to be, it's going to require some discussion among the groups, among the residents, and that is part of the process that the roundtable will undertake. That is going to be under discussion, assuming it's just deemed feasible by the FAA. Yes, sir.
Could you talk about the number of flights per day?
Well, I believe that a couple of weeks ago, the airport, Bert, correct me if I'm wrong, hit a new high of 1,500 and...
1,576. And that includes transiting aircraft going through the airspace as well. We're averaging about 1,400.
Internal, departures, arrivals?
Yes.
1,400. That's a lot of departures and arrivals, yes. And I don't want to, get you too worried up, but let me just tell you briefly that the numbers are increasing. And back in 2009, when we're coming out of that recession and traffic had dropped quite a bit, the airport was just shy of 380,000 a year, 379, 751, 380 operations in '09. In the conclusion of last year, they went from 380 to 450 for the year 2016. So the mathematicians here in the group can figure out what that equates to. I think it was something like 18, 19%, something in that category. And the future, you want to know the future forecast? No? I think I've got it. Let me see, maybe you'll be lucky and I won't. Yeah, it's not getting better, let me tell you that. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't bring my future chart. Bert might have it. But it's a big number.
It's going up.
It's going up. 2% a year is the forecast for San Francisco, 2% a year.
And
So-
one other thing, I wanted to partially answer your question. One of the goals of NextGen was to concentrate the flights. And you saw that on Bert's slide showing that the concentration has moved into a narrower path. And that was so that they could control the airspace.
And have a repeatable path and all that. And that's very true throughout the country, more so than here, but
Right.
here just.
And the effect of that is, if you're under that concentrated part, you're seeing a huge increase in noise. If you're slightly off that point, you're seeing a decrease.
Could you also, not a question, but just for more information for them.
Yes.
What's the height that they're flying at, 1,000 feet, 10,000 feet?
With
And-
regard to a departure,
At departure, and when they're coming in, when is it that they drop their landing gears?
okay, so
Because that's a point where it makes a lot of noise.
it does make a lot of noise, that's true. I'll take the second part first, and just so for those to orient us with this map again, this is the east-west runway. Generally speaking, aircraft will join in the middle of the bay somewhere around here. They'll come from the east and they'll come in this way, they'll come in here, but they'll wind up being somewhere near the Dunbarton Bridge, or a little bit closer in. And then they will fly a straight path to land here. At the San Mateo Bridge, they should, and it depends if it's a visual day, you can go a little later to do this, but by the San Mateo Bridge, you'll want to have your gear down, most of your flaps down, be ready to land. So that's where it gets particularly noisy for people.
There'd be 5,000 feet?
Oh, I'm sorry, that's about 2,000 feet, about
Okay,
1,900
okay.
is the bridge.
Can I add something?
And the second part was on departure? Altitudes?
On departure, when they're coming over the coast?
Okay,
what's
so
the-
they're coming up this way, going straight out to about 500 feet, going up here, and being directed to either a left turn, maybe here, somewhere along that path. And I would say about 3,000 feet, 2,500, 3,500. Bert, speak up if you don't like my numbers.
3,000 over Brisbane.
Yeah.
And about 5 to 6 coast.
Well, by the time they get down to port, most of them.
Down to port, they're about 8 to 10.
Yeah, they're under 10, but they're very close to it. And some of them are capable of being higher.
Yeah, actually, NextGen restricts altitude about 4 to 10,000 and below, even though, as you said, they could be easily flying 1,500.
I'm sorry, what was the thing
15,000.
about NextGen and 10,000?
NextGen restricts the height, the
Oh,
altitude at 10,000 or below.
The stick procedure restricts the height at port intersection, that's correct.
At 10,000 below, even though the aircraft would be perfectly capable of going
There-
15 or.
I don't know if you remember looking at all that spaghetti video in the very beginning, and we're looking at obviously two dimensions here, but we've got, paths going all over. And so I couldn't tell you the name of the other departure or arrival that's above 10 that's there, but there's one there. So it's not like they're holding them down below 10 because they want to give a scenic tour of the passengers or something. It's because that there's another slew of airplanes overhead or potentially overhead. So that is a safety thing. We've asked them to take a look at that to see if who's ever overhead maybe could move over a little bit or something. So we have definitely asked about that.
Thank you, Kathleen. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No,
You have more to
that's
say.
good. That's
Okay.
good. Everybody's happy?
Bill Kehoe next.
Excuse me, could you explain a little bit why we changed the flight path in the first place 2 or 3 years ago?
Yes.
I'm not clear on that.
Okay. And it's, especially in retrospect, it's very unclear why it all happened. Up until, well, and still, the aircraft have been navigating by a, let's call it a World War II era system of radar, which they're still using, but more importantly, ground-based radio transmitter beacons. Like if you have a walkie-talkie and you're transmitting. So the airplanes would fly from, let's just pretend this is someplace else. They'd fly from North Beacon to Northwest Beacon to here, to here, to here, to here, to get to where they wanted to go, because they had to fly where the beacons were. Now, they were generally set up in appropriate kinds of places, but it was not in a terribly efficient manner. So without those beacons, they could go straight to where they wanted to go. The other part is that the beacons are very expensive to maintain. I've long ago forgotten how much they are, but they're big honking little buildings that sit on a piece of dirt somewhere. And in this case, it sits right off there. And they require testing to make sure they're accurate every so often. Maintenance goes wrong, they got to put somebody out there on a little Jeep to the road to wherever these are. So it's a very, very high cost item in the government. So they said, hey, we've got all these satellites up there now. All we have to do is get all the receivers, and the airplane's got all the receivers. And airplanes have been flying GPS procedures for quite some time now. But it's only that the last couple of years the FAA started to coalesce this into a really high priority item for them to enhance efficiency. Unfortunately, that was done throughout the country at the expense of the people living underneath these efficient pathways. And it's been horrible for almost everybody who has encountered this new system.
It just seems such a short distance, you know. Let's see the efficiency of it. Really.
No argument from me.
It's not just gas or jet fuel efficiency, it's time efficiency, it's airplane safety. There's a very large number of goals. I imagine there's a document on the FlySFO website that talks about it.
Kathleen, to clarify, I mean, port is, that the port's waypoint was there before an accident.
Oh my gosh, for decades,
Right.
decades.
So, I mean, the big change for the coast side is that, the planes used to, they didn't take the concentrated pathway.
Well, and not only that, they sort of changed the new procedure is written slightly differently, is drawn slightly differently, so that although hardly anybody flies the exact procedure because they're begin vectors by ATC, the other pathway was a little bit more this way. It followed there's up here, somewhere up here is Point Reyes, and it followed a 135 radial off of Point Reyes to port. So it was sort of like, anyway, it was a slightly different path. And the concentrated path only makes that worse when they've changed it.
But it was over the ocean.
A portion, when I talked about very much earlier, we had this portion of them that went from here over to here and here. And that portion, it was called the offshore departure. And that was a pre-next gen, long-standing departure. And that is certainly over the ocean as far as our coast is concerned. And it's just the problem of getting the planes from here over to there.
Right, but I thought you were saying.
Could you look at the slide, that's the 2014, 2017 flight?
Used to go
In the
over
past,
the ocean, they go out over the Pacific and then down,
a little bit more than they do now, yes, yes.
more than a little bit.
Well,
Right? I mean, now they just go over land. They don't go over the bridge.
I would agree with you if we were looking at the drawn maps, the drawn procedures. And on the drawn procedures, it's a different pathway. But the way that the controllers have been vectoring people, oh good, we're gonna see. Do you have the other ones with the port,
Well,
with
this
the
one,
stick?
I asked Bert to put this up because this shows both 2014
Yeah.
before next gen and then this last month after next gen.
It's just hard to see the clump, but, with the clump. But you can see that there is a difference. And it's not a good difference.
Well, there's not much out on the left. That's the,
Yeah,
The
this,
thick-
this is thinned
Yeah,
out
the
considerably.
light lines over here.
yeah.
This is thinned out considerably. And I should say that.
Exactly. Less planes over there.
Yeah, and I should say that the offshore departure still exists and is used by extremely few people, but it still exists. And the number of old departures and arrivals still exist until all the aircraft are fully equipped and some of the.
And who gets to decide which of those routes get used? Is it the air traffic control, or is it the?
No, well, it's kind of a combination. But the way it works generally is that an airline, United, Southwest, Virgin, whoever, you've got two important people in that equation. One is the pilot, and one is the dispatcher, who's on the ground, who, before the flight, looks at the weather, looks at the track and the routing and all that kind of stuff, and files the flight plan with the FAA. And they will look for the most efficient plan, the best winds, and if weather is a factor, they don't want to run into thunderstorms or horrible stuff, so they'll avoid that, no matter the cost. And then that flight plan is filed with the FAA, and in certain circumstances, the FAA can override their flight plan and suggest another one. Now, having said that, the pilot is the final word on anything. She or he can, say, I don't like where that's going, there's a thunderstorm there. But generally, you have a good reason for saying no to it. So it's a combination of people involved. But it starts with the dispatcher at the major airlines.
Thank you. And I want to remind people, wait your turn to go to the podium, and if you're not at the podium, the video doesn't pick up the question. The answers are making it pretty obvious, but please wait for your turn.
We good?
Bill? Thank you.
Bill Keel, North Beach. What I was going to ask, Catherine, I think it is, kind of touched on it already, but we haven't really tackled the 800-pound gorilla in the room. You say, and I would argue the point, that it's not just money. And I'd say that's probably the primary factor. Yes, safety is a big concern, although if I look at that and I see the lighter blue concentration over land, the propensity for accidents would increase if they're concentrated in a smaller space than going out wider to the ocean to a more dissipated space. So I think when you asked who finally decides, I think the 800-pound gorilla is the airlines, worried about the time from gate to gate because they don't want to get hit with, the misnomer or the actual, the label of, being late to the gates, late arrivals and all that. And also fuel economy and personnel economy. This is a dirty business and margins are thin and people want to make money. However, just anecdotal evidence, I used to fly a lot when I was in business. Did a lot of Southern California runs, and I can remember taking off from SFO, the loop to go just south of San Francisco, go out over the ocean. I used to be able to see my house as I went over. In fact, I would look. Now they're so close to land, I'd have to look through the floor to see them flying over Moss Beach. What really surprised me, it was all the way down the coast. I just went to San Diego in June for my son's graduation. I used to be able to look out the window from the left. In fact, I always try to make my seat on the left so I can watch. It's an old habit from train days. But I wasn't sure when I was even coming up on LA. I couldn't see, the oil fields just south of Santa Barbara or whatever, because I was so far inland. I said, why are they doing this now? And so it's money. It's money, and that's why they're going to do it. And all the rest of the information that Kathy gave, 100% right on. Air traffic's going to increase. Density of the traffic is going to increase. They're going to, concentrate it more. So maybe people should stop complaining about high-speed rail and get behind it, because that might be the only solution here, guys. It's like, the air traffic is saturated. It was saturated back in the mid-'80s when I was doing air traffic control software at Raytheon and under the old system. And yeah, the more you add the computers and the new algorithms and the new capabilities to do that, it's just going to concentrate it more and more. So a lot of people want to travel, you know, maybe there has to be other forms. And to tie it all in, it's the same problem we have on Highway 1. It really is. It's the same problem. So, you know, we're not going to legislate it away. We have to look for alternative ways of doing it. And I think that's the real challenge for everybody who's working on this. It's not just the airplane issue, it's the whole transportation solution, not just in the Bay Area, but around the country. And what are we gonna do? That's the bigger question. And I know the feds own this and probably be very not cooperative with the current administration and any issues that California will raise. But at some point, we have to look for other ways to deal with this outside of that. And, you know, that's the hard part. Just staying within the regulation. I know that's your focus, John. But what are you gonna do for the next 20 years, 30 years, 40 years?
Yes, go ahead.
Just a few comments and a couple questions.
Could you give your name and?
Oh, yes. I'm Jane Prey Silver, and I live in El Granada, right under the airplane flags. First off, thank you for those of you who are working on this. We really do appreciate that, especially in times when I give up all hope. I'm glad to hear that someone's working on it. One question I have is that Palo Alto was very well organized, and I read in the paper about a year ago that Jackie Spear was very concerned that they were going to shift those airplanes over to the ocean. They thought that wouldn't be shifting it over to a town, and that's when I noticed more increase. So what my first question, I'm just going to go through all my questions and then somebody can answer them, is did the air traffic shift? Because that's when I noticed a tremendous increase. My second is about profitability, and I read that this is such a huge profitable situation, the next gen, for the airlines, that I can't see much motivation for them. They implemented this without public input, which is why places like Phoenix are winning their lawsuits. And it kind of reminds me, you know, like when you're 16 years old, you decide you want to go to that wild party and you're told you can't go. And you come in your mind and you think, you know, I'm just going to go and I'll worry about the feedback later. And so you get the privilege of doing that. And that kind of reminds me of what happened with Next Gen. But as you get older, you realize that getting input from other people about whether you should buy that house or how many kids you should have is really worthwhile. And so I think having public input is actually going to really help the airline industry if they will really seriously and sincerely take that in. My next question is really about the complaint forms. I have planes going over my house every 3 minutes. And I could fill out one of those complaint forms. It takes about a minute to fill out. And the planes go over my house from the moment I wake up to the moment I go to bed. And so as I said at another meeting, I have little dogs that I take out every hour outside. They're allowed to be outside for 45 seconds because I can't stand the noise. And then we come in, we close the doors, we close the windows. And it sounds like I've got 2 years to wait for this to solve. So I guess one of my questions is, those complaint forms, what's the most efficient way for me to fill those out? Should I fill them out every 3 minutes? I mean, because my understanding is they're looking at these cities for how many the number of complaints that come out. I've only complained about 3 times. They're looking at the number of complaints. So if that's going to work, I'll do the work. So anyway, thank you again for your help on this, and I hope that the rest of us can hang in there, because this is a really discouraging problem for many of us.
Well, let's work backwards, if you don't mind. On the complaint forms, if you want to give us a high volume, I recommend you just annotate it. And so, time. Put that in an email to sfo.noise@flysfo.com. If you want, there are some apps out there that people are using right now. In fact, it's about 98% of our traffic. Last year, we did about 3.5 million complaints. 2014, we had 15,000, just to give you an idea.
Wait, 15,000 to 3.5 million
15,000 to 900,000 to 3.5 million.
in 2 years?
Complaints.
Yes. So if you want to give us large volume, you can actually do it through the form as well. Just transfer your times into that. Each one of those will be counted as a complaint for you, or a noise report. More sensitive way to put it. Profitability. There is that in there. There's also reduced emissions. There's also, when NextGen is hammering on all cylinders like it should be, they will have the gate-to-gate information. They will have the other tools, such as the time-based performance and metering. They will have the space differential. They'll also be able to reduce delays for airports like SFO. So NextGen's supposed to do a lot of things. And when they had the stakeholders in a long time ago and they said, what does everybody want? Everybody put their input in, and then they went behind the curtain and did the magic. Well, who all was behind the curtain, I don't know in the end. I do know that the airlines were involved and the FAA was involved, and there was limited input from airports and the communities. We did have input, I know, in the stakeholder meeting where I mentioned that we would prefer to have our Big Sur arrival become an optimized profile descent, which is basically glided in over the community. That's a good thing. I recommended too that they take the quiet and the silent from the San Francisco eastern shoreline and move it out in the middle of the bay to the hush and the night nowadays. We got that. That's a good thing. Some of the folks in Alameda and Oakland aren't terribly happy with it, but it does take a lot of the pressure off of the San Francisco and puts it in the middle. Equity, I guess is the way to put that one. Splitting the baby on that one. Now, are the airlines able to fly shorter distance? Yes. In some cases they are. But if you look at the Metroplex document itself, you'll see in there where the FAA did show that, well, gosh, we're doing this routing pretty much 80% of the time by vectoring aircraft. All we're doing is codifying. Okay, I can buy on that one, but did we really do it well? I can't say.
And do you have a lot of ship plans over to us?
No, I truly don't believe that one. I'm gonna dig deeper into that one. In fact, I have your name. I'm gonna dig deeper and send you an email once I see about that comment. I don't even remember it. I sat through all the work on that.
There was a proposal and strong pressure from Menlo Park and Palo Alto, but I believe that change was not.
I believe that one died.
Yeah.
Second.
I've been to some of the meetings too, and they basically, the FAA, they don't allow one to change, to move the noise from one community and give it to another community, so I don't believe that happened.
Yeah, I mean, the Palo Alto community is very organized, and we're very, very engaged in this group, which I started on, this select committee on South Bay arrivals. Their community went out and hired their own airplane expert. They spent a lot of their, they appropriated funds from their city budget. They did not have any extra influence on what the recommendations that the committee came up with. In fact, frankly, they were dissatisfied with the way it came out. So some of their ideas that potentially might have impacted the coast were not going to be implemented. And then, the comment was made about, who sets the rules? And if you had frankly, if you had a Democratic Congress, some things could change. Because right now, the airlines, the FAA puts a very low priority on noise. And back in the day, before 1990, the Environmental Protection Agency used to look at flight changes. But Congress got rid of that. Congresswoman Spear, I believe, has a bill to bring that type of review back. But I think folks in this room know that's pretty hard work when you don't have a Democratic Congress. So that's another thing that we're going to have to see change. We need a different rules. The rules are not in our favor currently.
Okay. Aaron will be next.
Thank you. Hi, guys.
Hello.
Hi, so I'm kind of going to jump around a little bit because I had a little bit of a...
Introduce yourself.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Erin Deinzer from Montera. So much like, I'm sorry, I forgot your name. Jane. I have a couple of statements and a couple of questions. So the first thing that I wanted to ask as a question is in some of the, in one of the slides that you had shown to us, and thank you, by the way, for the presentation, one of the sort of mandates or a tenet of San Francisco Airport is to reduce the environmental impact of the airport. And I wanted to point out that we have a huge amount of agriculture here in our area. And I was reading about a study that was done not too long ago on particulate matter from Los Angeles Airport, and that they actually had found it 10 miles from the airport. And we have planes flying directly overhead here, and we have a lot of agriculture that we're growing. So how's that impacting the agriculture that we're growing here? The second thing that I wanted to ask as a question is, are the controllers a part of this dialogue? Because I've heard several times that they have a lot of discretion, they have a lot of leeway. And I was just wondering, are they a part of the dialogue at all in terms of what kind of solutions that we can come up with? If it'll make people feel any better, I live in Montera, and on a Sunday night, between 7:15 p.m. and 7:21 p.m., I recorded 7 jets over my house. That's 7 in 6 minutes. I could actually see 2 of them cross over each other above me. I go to a site called Flight Radar 24, and I actually brought some printouts with me. And I also logged a flight a couple of nights ago from Memphis to Honolulu that flew right over Montera. And there's also another one from Anchorage to Los Angeles that flew right over us. They were out over the ocean, but then they actually flew right over Montera, El Granada, and Half Moon Bay. The other thing is that I was wondering if part of the next gen is to make things more efficient and to conserve fuel. I don't understand why San Francisco Airport has, and 4 of them flew over my house within a 12-minute period. Flights from San Francisco Airport to Las Vegas, that's east. So they're going north, then they're going west, then they're going south, and then they're going east. That doesn't make sense. In addition to that, there's also a flight from Oakland to Burbank that flew over Montera, and it's doing the exact same thing. It's flying north, well actually it's flying west to then go south. And when I look at these printouts, there's plenty of airspace available for them to be flying right out of Oakland. The other thing that I wanted to say is that several people have said we don't want to shift noise to other communities, but that's exactly what's happened to us. We have had all of this noise shifted to our community, and I think a part of the problem is that because we're small and we're rural and we don't have a lot of people here, it's like, oh, well, let's just put it out there. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't impact us. I will tell you that it's like that water torture where it just constantly drips on your head. When I'm out in my backyard, it's like I keep waiting for the next one. Oh, there it is. Oh, there it is. It's just, it's constant and it's unrelenting and it's all the time. It's all day, it's every day. I mean, I would invite anybody to come out and sit in my backyard on a Saturday or a Sunday, which is when you're supposed to be at home relaxing. And there was literally not 1 minute during the day or up until about 12 at night where there's not a plane flying over my house, directly over my house. I can hear it and see it. So the last thing that I wanted to find out is there was something, and I made a little note to myself, that's the CNEL. And that was also another thing that was on one of your slides. And I was just wondering what is considered in the vicinity of an airport. Because even though we're not Daly City or we're not, you know, near the Tan Fran Mall, we're now in the vicinity of the airport because we have all of these flights coming over here all the time. Okay, thank you. Oh, and just for visuals, I'm going to pass these around so you can see. feel free to share.
Thank you.
This is for the audience.
Sure, I'll take those. Well, as far as the environmental impact of the airport, San Francisco International and the management, we are tasked with reducing our environmental footprint or sustainability for the community. Yes, truthfully, it is more locally than the area around. Now, that's not to say that we aren't interested and we aren't going to try and affect change. So, the airport director, Ivar Satero, is a very good guy, and he's very interested in helping. So I think we'll see more outreach and are trying to do that. As far as the local airport environs, you asked that question a little bit further on. I'm jumping around myself and answering. But typically, within the footprint of the noise contour was pretty much where noise abatement offices used to act and react. Well, as we've always done, we've always been within the county of San Mateo at least. And under NextGen, gosh, we found ourselves down south of Santa Cruz and Carmel, answering questions and trying to help and give information to the FAA to see if we could affect change. Sea Ranch, 100 miles north of SFO. The Sierras, Jamestown, Columbia, another 100 miles east. So well beyond us, and it isn't all SFO when you get out that far. It's a conglomeration of other airports joining in that airway. But we are part of it. Not shirking it, just saying we are part of it. So we're very interested in doing what we can to affect change. But the one nice thing about the GPS procedures is instead of going so much point to point, it will allow latitude further out and the dispersion of tracks at higher altitudes. Now, what we're trying for here, such as moving to, say, Whammy or another waypoint off the coast, it would take the burden off. And so that's what we're looking for. Your emissions, jumping back to that one real quick. I know that they have said when the winds heavily blow east, that all the Bay Area traffic emissions go into the Central Valley and lay there, another agricultural area. So, yes, I think we're victims of our own success as far as that goes. Now, I am not an emissions expert. I'll fess up to that right away. But I do know that there are a lot of studies and a lot of reports forthcoming on it. So we'll have to be paying attention to those. The controllers, yes, they are bringing controllers in to have the dialogue on the initiatives. They're running it up to the region and back to Oklahoma City to make sure that they are doing it according to the rules, and also make sure that they have the safety and the clearances and everything else under what they call TERPs, which is their term for making sure that obstacles, airspace, everything else is abided by. They then come back to the controllers and they say, all right, so this isn't working for the community. If we did this, would this work? And the controllers will say, okay, but what about the Oakland departures headed south as well? They're at 6,000 by then. If you let the San Francisco flights run further up, you're going to run into problems there. Something like that. So they are having dialogue with it as well. So it makes sure it'll work for everybody. Yes, the Memphis-Honolulu flight you mentioned, and the Anchorage, I can't remember the other port on that one. But yeah, we do what's in air traffic, it's called Great Circle routes. So shortest distance between 2 points is not always a straight line. You may find an arc being flown. For example, out of SFO to go to Asia, oftentimes they are going by Anchorage. Unless the winds are right, then they'll go straight across.
Well, just to let you know, and you'll see it soon, but actually the Anchorage to alignment, they could have actually done a loop and bypassed us, but instead they cut straight across.
One thing we have found with FlightAware is it's not always accurate. erroneous altitudes are.
But I can tell you because I was sitting in front of my computer.
Well, it's not
And I heard
accurate.
the flight, and I left, and, I
Okay.
mean, there's pretty much a correlation.
Well, on that one, I'm gonna write down the flight information, everything. I'm gonna check it on our system, because
Okay.
quite often we find this, a very big disparity. So, yeah, or if you can email them to me, it's fine. I'm happy to check them.
Okay.
And I think we with the exception of the, why are the Las Vegas flights, Burbank flights, things like that. Two things. We have Oakland Airport out here. We also have the arriving traffic from the east. So to declutter that, they send them this way. So west is where they go with them. And that's the main reason for it. The other reason too is there's some military operations areas out east of us. And so those are continuously hot. One thing we're asking for in the FAA is, all right, well, if the military isn't using them so often and the airlines have to, and the controllers have to ask if they can go through it, and occasionally they get a yes, why don't we just make the military ask to use it more often than not? And so it's a bit of a fight with our military, so it'll be an interesting one to see. But I know during the Thanksgiving and Christmas rush, a lot of times they talk about FAA freeing up airspace. That's exactly what they're talking about. They've talked with the military. They've shut down those military operations areas, and they can actually transit aircraft through there. Helps a lot, especially when the weather's not good.
Again, certainly not an expert, but if you look at the maps, you'll see there's kind of wide open space going from Oakland out, or even eastbound from San Francisco. And again, like late at night, when you have 4 flights to Las Vegas leaving within a 15-minute time period, I don't understand why they can't just fly east.
Well, we'd have to pull up the tracks from the east coming in to the Bay Area, and that's where I think we'll find our issue.
And you have to remember San Jose is in that flight path too. If you were to send them
Right.
straight to Las Vegas, you'd be going into San Jose Airport airspace.
Well, one thing they have up there you can see is the San Jose Loop 9 departure to get over the hill. It departs, does the racetrack, and then comes back out and goes up, and then goes east. So there's lots going on out here, both for arrivals and departures. They've cleaned it up quite a bit with these, but we'll see what we can do.
Right, just added, one point you raised was, we really struggle with this, is that if you have a procedure that's quiet, the planes need to fly the procedure. And many times, they have very valid reasons not to, because of weather or something else is happening in the airspace. But sometimes we can't figure out, like for the life of us, why they aren't flying the procedure. And that's where having a good relationship with this TRACON is really important. And again, a small positive thing is there's now a representative who comes to our meetings. Help me with her name, I can't remember.
Than McLeod.
Yeah, who is, head and shoulders better than anyone we've had before. And she is, she goes to the round table, and, I have confidence that she's gonna read the riot act a little bit more to these folks sitting at TRACON. So many of us have actually gone to this TRACON. It's a pretty interesting place.
What's that an acronym for?
Terminal radar control.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, it's outside of Sacramento. So you go in there, it's like super secure, it takes you forever to get in. Then you get in, and there's all these screens, and it looks a little bit like software coders. Everyone's kind of laid back, they're wearing sandals, they're watching these monitors, and they don't have any visual at all of what's underneath those planes. They don't see the shoreline, they don't see the cities. So, it's not in their mind. So that's why our representative here has to stay on them. So again, the encouraging thing is FAA and TRACON are more involved than other. The problem, of course, is that they set everything so far back when they did the next gen.
Could we, the woman in the back, sorry, I don't know your name.
I really want to appreciate, my name is Lisa Forward, I live in El Granada, and I really want to appreciate everyone who is doing what they can to make this better. I concur with my neighbors. This is just literally, the word would be abusive, incessant, nightmarish. Obviously, we were getting the normal amount of air traffic as anywhere the rest of the large metroplex areas for a long period of time. And as someone who travels, that's fine with me. I don't care. A plane going over my house every once in a while is not a problem. But clearly, it looks to me like this could be fanned back out. And so I'm glad that you guys are, talking about that. There's really no reason for this. And quite honestly, if lawsuits like Phoenix have to be the way we do this, then that's the way we have to do this. And that would be unfortunate. And I really appreciate anyone who's trying to avoid that, because I don't think anyone wants to see that happen. So I've been using an app called stopjetnoise.net, and that's one of my questions for you. Are those reports going to you? Good, because I'm all over that thing.
That's 98% of our volume.
Excellent. So everyone make note of that, stopjetnoise.net, because I know I do have a full-time job. I'm a realtor here on the coast. I don't have time to sit with my app and hit it every minute of every single day, because that's what it would really take for me to do that. I'm with my neighbor in Montera. It is literally every single minute of every single day, incessantly and abusively. However, I did take a moment to just kind of hit my reports, and I forgive the formatting. I'm not a formatting queen, so there's some formatting issues in here. But if you really want to just kind of skim, these are my reports from basically December of last year until just last week or so. And if you want to hit the high points, you'll read the blue ink, and you'll see that in December 9th of 2016, 12 flights before 6 a.m., one every 6 minutes. I was asleep, as a lot of people are at that time. On the next page, August 4th, I was actually sick that day, except for I was trying to rest, and I could not because of the incessant 29 flights, one every 11 minutes. And believe me, I really wasn't tracking every single one because I was trying to rest because I was really sick. And so 4 flights after midnight. This is only, like I said, what I tracked between 12:38 a.m. and 6:25 a.m. And after 10:45 a.m. So note that the red ink is things that are after 11 p.m. and before, I believe, 7 a.m. And also things, you'll notice that there are some pretty egregious elevation, such as 4,000 feet over my house. I mean, my gosh, right? So you'll note that. It just goes on and on and on. On the 17th of August, 60 flights, one every 5.5 minutes, 3 of them under 6,000 feet. So this is just obviously, this is a 9-month, 10-month period of time. I'm not tracking this every single day because I do work. And unlike the people with the FAA, apparently they have better things to be doing than thinking about the people that actually use their airplanes. So I really, again, I appreciate all of you. I have tried writing the FAA, and all I get is, Mrs. Forward, Port has been there for 30 years. And I'm sorry, but that's not good enough. And Laszlo, I want to just appreciate you for being a loud voice on the coast side. Really, thank you so much. Well, as long as we can get louder than these damn airplanes, we're in good shape. So thank you, and enjoy.
You can be next. We have one letter to read.
This is from a citizen in the community. I'm going to read this person's comments into the record. To whom it may concern, we purchased our home in Montera in part because of the quiet beach town feel. In the evenings, we could see, yet not hear, the parade of planes coming and going from SFO, skirting the tops of the mountains as they headed out to sea. Since NextGen, they now turn and head straight over Pacifica, Montera, and over our home and on down the coast side. On busy air traffic days, there may be 2 at a time, one to the east and one to the west, bringing noise to the beaches too. Because they are still climbing as they go over our homes, they are loud, and as the rumble of one plane begins to fade in the distance, the next one goes overhead. Some days it is relentless, and I have been woken several times by the roars and rumbles at all hours of the night. Because of Montera Mountain, sounds seem to be trapped and amplified. I can clearly hear the tsunami warning sirens Wednesdays at 10 a.m., and we can easily hear the foghorn at Pillar Point Harbor. When visitors come to the coastside to beat the heat and get away, they are also subjected to the flyovers. I have witnessed the commercial aircraft turn, flying low, go right over the beaches. People come to the coastside to get away from the heat and noise. Our beaches and beach communities need to have the peace restored. Please return the peace to our coastside community, our tourist mecca, and our homes. The plane should be heading out to sea, the shortest route possible, impacting the fewest people as possible. Respectfully, Sue Hawley of Montera. Thank you.
My name is Steve Wyman. I live in Montera, and echo my experience is very much similar to that. I used to live right up the hill here on Avenue Balboa, and I never heard noises like I've heard lately. And my wife uses the app a lot and has a similar experience to what was forward and the other speakers have said. It's constant, and it's nothing like it was before. And it just seems it's going to continue until somebody makes them change it. And I appreciate the work of the people on the round table and the councils that have tried to put voice to this. But I do feel like has been said, because we're a small community, Montera, not just Montera, but the coastline in general, that it's not going to be heard. And I think Laszlo's correct that litigation is the way to go. And to the extent that San Mateo County can join in on this, I think that will get some pressure. And, you know, I am an attorney, and it's not often that lawsuits go all the way to the end. Even just joining in there and showing the pressure can get things to move. Whereas now, there's really no incentive for the airlines, certainly, apart from a little public relations help, to do anything, because it is all profit-based. And the tighter flight lines allow them to get more planes in, so the efficiencies just mean more planes coming in. And in terms of the lost time, I just don't think, from the passenger's perspective, we're really going to see that, because I've flown, they get you the flights there, Philadelphia, San Francisco, and they don't have a gate for you. They've managed to get all their planes there, and then you wait to get in, and they're sitting there and they're running fuel for 10, 20 minutes. I waited like close to an hour once. And that's what's going to be our future, increased flights and over it. And this was it is extremely quiet place here where I live. It's very quiet, except when the planes are going by. And yes, there were planes before. Daly City, the people that live there, they knew they were going to get planes over their head. And their real estate values, you know, I'm happy for them to the extent that it's been relieved somewhat, but it's been just directed at us. So to the extent that it's not, the goal wasn't to send it to us, that hasn't really been achieved, because more of them were just going out of the ocean. And as has been pointed out by many people, including Laszlo and others, just moving it like 10, 20 miles out to sea, it's hard to imagine that change to the port location is really going to affect any of the efficiencies that much. And maybe there are other considerations, but it doesn't seem like it's that hard to do to get it away from these coastside committees. And yes, they have to get there somewhere, but right now they're going directly over us. So they're going to go over somebody, they can spread them out, maybe more than one port. But something is done. I think litigation maybe is the way to go. And our voices, again, aren't being heard that much. The complaints are going to be from fewer people than Palo Alto. And a question I have for the representative is, you said there was a monitoring station in Montera. Is that part of an overall, are there more noise measuring things that are going to be coming out here? And is any of that going to be taken into consideration by anyone? That's pretty much all I have. Thank you.
We have what we call a portable noise monitor for a 2-week period in Montera. That is a residence yard. And we'll take that data and report back on it. And if we get a baseline of noise, we don't have a monitor out here. Now, modeling could be done, but you would see that it is below the 65 decibel noise level. And I can assure you with that, the FAA will say we're below the 65.
Our community is quieter than a city that has freeway noise.
I'm not arguing that. I'm just saying the general statement that we'll see. But what our goal is to find the baseline that we have now, which is not a good baseline for you, and see if we can get it off.
If I could add a couple comments. I mean, you know, first off, in terms of the work of the roundtable and Kathleen and Congressman Spear's office and myself, you know, the co-side has not been at a disadvantage. It's not like there's been some extra attention paid to someone else because they complain more. I mean, I think people need to file their complaints, but you know, the issue is well understood, and everyone here is working on it. Now, the other thing that has come up, and has come up more recently as well, why we should sue. And there's been an important case was recently decided concerning the Phoenix airport, where they also implemented NextGen, and a suit was brought, and the court basically told the FAA to like start over again. So the obvious question is, well, why can't we do that too? And there's three reasons that make that not feasible, to be frank about it. First off, there were 4 people in the peninsula who filed a lawsuit 60 days after NextGen was implemented. And that case went to the 9th Circuit Court of Appeals, and the court ruled that the FAA had acted properly, that they had considered the environmental impacts, that they did not act in any arbitrary or capricious way, and they were unwilling to tell the FAA to do something different. So that the 9th Circuit is the court, the highest court in the land out of the Supreme Court. So that precedent is a big issue. Secondly, under the law, you have to file these complaints within 60 days. Now, in Phoenix, they actually didn't. And the court went to great lengths to kind of give them a break because they felt that the airport had kind of led them on. We don't have those facts here, plus we already have a suit that was filed within 60 days. And thirdly, as bad as it was here in terms of getting public input, because we all were beaten on the FAA saying, you can't do this, you've got to go out to the community, you've got to get input, and they did some, it was more form over substance. Well, in Phoenix, they did like nothing. I mean, they did like, you know, they made the outreach in the SFO look robust compared to what they did there. So that case is, you know, not going to be helpful. It's not going to create some litigation pathway. And we've had probably one of the best airline aviation lawyers in the country assess that. So, you know, it's just not going to be a tool for us. Yeah. Yeah, actually the same lawyer, the lawyer who worked on the Phoenix case is the same guy who told us that it's not going to help you.
I'm glad that Dave answered that question, but I was going to also say that when I started off this evening, I talked about the other parts of the county that I represent, and Dave represents another significant part, and I can tell you that we've been in meetings with people from San Mateo, Burlingame, Redwood City, Woodside, Portola Valley. People in Portola Valley, very influential. They cannot, in some cases, sleep in their house because of the vibration of their house. So it's not just the coast side, and also, you know, if you have 3 million complaints a year, there are not 3 million people out here. So it's not just the coast side. And Daly City has not had a diminution of the noise. All you gotta do is go up to San Bruno, Millbrae, Daly City, and the noise up there is deafening on a daily basis. So, you know, I'm not mitigating what's happening on the coast side. It has gotten significantly worse, but that's not to say that, you know, I can tell you one of my best friends moved from San Mateo, couldn't stand it. He was that sensitive to the noise. He went over to Livermore, and now he's baking in the heat. But in any case, it's not, you know, we're well aware of the fact that the coast side never had it before, but it didn't mean that, you know, it's less in Daly City or San Bruno. It's the same horrible situation there as it always was.
Can I ask just one more quick question as a follow-up? Oh, sorry, sir. Anybody else?
Is anybody who's not spoken want to speak? Let's go with the gentleman in the back. And then you.
My name's Graham Wood. I live in El Granada. I actually travel a lot on business. I spend a lot of time on planes, so it's not that I'm anti-aircraft, and I realise that they're going to make noise. Having said that, I did move to El Granada 17 years ago because it was a lot quieter than San Mateo, which is where I used to live. That was one of the reasons for moving over here. And the last couple of years, that hasn't been the case. So, for example, this morning, I had to get up early to deal with some medications for my partner. Between 6 and 6:30, there were 12 planes over my house. And that was between 6 and 6:30. So we dealt with the medications. I was trying to go back to sleep, not with 12 planes. It's not going to work. One question about presentations. Will we get access to copies of those presentations?
So we have one set already to go on the website if they're not already there. And Bert, if you can send me a copy of yours, I will get it on our website.
Figure that out. It's 36 megs large.
Yeah. Okay. Because I deal with data. It's my job. So I would be interested in looking more at the data.
It will absolutely be on the website.
That is there. Thank you. Right. It was interesting to see in the objectives of the next gen, as a couple of people have already mentioned, that there were lots of interested parties and lots of things that it was designed to do, but none of them had anything to do with the communities involved underneath any of these aircraft. And that really does seem to have been a major omission. And I realise that nobody in this room can do anything about that now. But this really does seem to be the main reason for it. There was a statement made about shifting noise is just not fair, and that is exactly what's happened. There was the occasional aircraft went over, other folks have said this, and now it's just all the time. Shifting noise is not fair. It was shifted to us, and for some reason, shifting it away from us isn't fair, but shifting it to us was okay. And that doesn't seem fair to me. In terms of efficiencies and things from the different flight plans, as I say, I travel a lot. The 1 minute, maybe 2 minutes difference in flight time doing the direct cut down through the peninsula rather than going over to the ocean and down. If it's going to take me 3 or 4 hours to get to LA after I've done the check-in, gone through TSA, all that stuff, out the other side, 1 minute, 2 minutes is nothing. It's not making any difference to passenger efficiency, or you're sat at a gate waiting for a jetway to get out. Right? So if the purpose of it was for efficiency, then this really isn't going to make in our particular case here, it's not going to make any big difference. But it does seem like it's certainly caused a lot of inconvenience for this community. In terms of the monitoring, I'd be more than happy for you to set up your monitors in my yard. Because I would be interested to see what the decibel level is there. And I think that's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My name is Katha Bierman, and I live on the ceiling over here on this mat. And it's all open space around me, except for my neighbor. And I'd also be willing to take one of your noise monitors, although it's not really the noise level for us. Again, it's the frequency. And I'm wondering, is there any equipment that records the frequency rather than the noise level that we could also put on our property for you? That would be fine. So that was one question. And you were mentioning, Bert, about starting a baseline for our community, and I think it's too late for that. And the baseline was 2 years ago. That should have been done before the change was made. And let's see, and then also just to mention to the council that we did have a petition that, 350 people signed for our complaints around here. So that's it. Thank you.
So can I ask you, Chris, you were saying that a baseline from 2 years ago would have been very useful.
Yes.
Does the FAA or the airport have historical data on flight paths?
They
from
have
that time period?
flight tracks, yes. Noise, no. They have modeled noise.
Right, but seeing the path that was being taken 2 years ago versus the path that's being taken now.
Yes.
And is it possible to access that data, or is that?
If you would like, you may do what is called a FOIA request to the FAA and get flight track data. And if you would like a comparison like this or something like that, we can do that.
Okay.
So obviously we have it. We go back to 99.
Right.
But to answer the question on the frequency, so measuring frequency, do you mean like vibration? Number, yes, you can do that by
Frequency,
something
high
like
frequency.
this. Track density, very easy to do. So we put a grid on, pull the flight tracks through it, and we can say number of per square.
But are you talking,
Within a time?
We'd have to do different ways of doing it. But this is a month, so we have a time of a month.
But I think it would be more eye-opening to see like how many were in 1 hour. Flights or minutes.
Well, we're looking for ways of expressing that right now. We're looking more for quality of life issues at my office.
6 o'clock in the morning is a good time to look at.
2:30 in the morning is another.
11 p.m. I mean, it varies.
But
I
that's
mean,
very directly related to the slide you showed about frequency. So I think that data would be very useful.
like I said, we're looking at ways of expressing it that's meaningful. Right now, we can say, okay, we had 1,400 operations in an hour. Great, where'd they go?
Right.
So
just,
we
like,
need to really
concentrate.
figure out what microcosms we're gonna look at. And how small do we get? I mean, that's kind of where we're figuring it out. Quite small.
Well, I'm sorry, if the, let's say, the MCC has some specific areas that they'd like to have specific data about the number of flights per day over one specific corridor, can we get that at some point?
We can do that,
So,
yes.
so we could, in other words, we could, from MCC, narrow that down and then get that information.
Happy to work with them.
Yeah, I'll just add, I mean, there's no question that the number of flights have increased over the, but it's gonna do, there's two things that are happening. One is, the gentleman talked about, well, how much more efficient is a single flight? Right, it's not much. But part of the reason the FAA did this next gen, so they could jam more flights closer together and create these highways in the sky. So that's where they gain their efficiency, because they move more flights on the same pathway.
This makes no difference to that.
Each flight may have the same time, but the number of flights.
No, this makes no difference to that.
It's more flights. They accommodate more flights. There's been there's a tremendous growth in flights. I mean, look at all the cheap airlines that are traveling down south. So with the FAA saying, well, how are we going to accommodate this? Well, we'll create these highways in the sky so we can put them closer together and move more of them faster. That's when they talk about efficiency, that's what they mean.
So can we make security last like 2 hours and no one will want to fly?
I mean, I'm not defending them, but I'm just saying that the reason there's more people traveling, and these procedures are designed, to concentrate people on single paths, where we didn't have that in the past.
This path didn't used to go in this direction.
Right. There wasn't a single. There wasn't as concentrated as it is now. Next gen is concentrated it. It was much more, as we've seen. It was much more dissipated. It was more over water. Right. And part of our recommendations is to try to move more of it over water, you know.
Shifting isn't fair, but shifting it over water seems like that is fair.
Well, yeah.
Water isn't, you know, okay, Wales may not be happy about it, but I don't think they're going to be voting next time.
Yeah. So, you know, also just before, you know, we forget, you know, the MCC can certainly, you know, consider having someone on a regular basis come to our roundtable meetings and report back here. I mean, I can certainly do that too, but, you know, if you want to get someone, you know, in the mix, that you can certainly, well, we'd welcome that. And we have some materials, right, Kathleen? Excuse me, Linda Wallen from my office, who's really done yeoman's task here. Has a couple things, right, handouts for folks. And tell us what we're handing out.
We are passing out a list of some useful links, including Bert's website, which a lot of the data is available on the website and also is reported to the roundtable on a regular basis. So the roundtable website itself is a useful resource, and Jackie Spear has a whole page devoted to aviation noise with a ton of all the reports that have been referenced, all the responses, letters and such. That's all on the sheet. And then another thing I'm passing out is an analysis that was done by the roundtable consultant to pick the things out of the report that are more likely to have an impact on the Midcoast. So Kathleen spoke about 2 of them, but there's maybe 10 or 12 of the 100 and whatever, the 10 or 12 that really impact here.
Right, and so in terms of tangible things, the most important thing of the whole evening is this memo. It describes the changes that we're asking the FAA to make.
And these documents will also be on the MCC website.
Right.
And then the last thing is just a one-pager from the roundtable itself, just explaining what the roundtable is and who all the representatives are. So there's every city in San Mateo County is a member, as is the county, as is the city.
So, you know, I think one thing we can do is this memo with the 10 or 12 changes, you know, in another, you know, towards the end of the year, we can update it and say, well, how has the FAA responded? What have they said? Because a lot of this stuff is still being looked at by them.
And the full list is on the FlySFO website.
What's that?
The full list from which this was drawn.
But these are the ones that are pertinent to the Midcoast. So,
yeah. Aaron had one follow-up question, and then Laszlo. Did anybody else have any more statements or questions? Okay, great. Go ahead, Aaron.
Okay, thanks. I'll just make it super fast. So the first thing I want to say is I know it's getting late, and I really appreciate everybody being out here, especially you guys that are coming out here after work. I mean, we're all here out after work, but it's important to us, and we appreciate it.
Of this meeting.
You're right, I am. So to that end, I wanted to say that if you want somebody, you had just mentioned, if you want somebody to come and attend those quarterly roundtable meetings and kind of report back to the community, like, I'm happy to do that. So anyway, so I just wanted to say I actually did read through the paperwork on Jackie Spear's site, and one of the things I just wanted to ask about is it seemed to me, and perhaps I was misunderstanding, but I just want to make sure that I am not, that after reading through the FAA's July 27 initiative to address noise concerns, it seems that the vast majority of recommendations that the 3 Bay Area representatives, Congresswoman Spear and 2 other people, are working on focus on arrivals to SFO, and we are being impacted by departures. So I just want to. Okay, so you can address. I'm just going to say that for the moment. And then the second thing is, I just wanted to also ask or underscore, just so that we're all and I think that I'm speaking for the community. It's not noise like Portola Valley houses. They're high. I get that. It's the frequency. That's what's driving us crazy. It's the non-stop plane after plane after plane.
Portola Valley is under the arrival path, so they've got exactly the same frequency.
Okay, well, whatever their issue is, though,
takes off.
I'm just saying.
First.
No, okay, then let me withdraw Portola. It's not noise. It's frequency. That's what we're talking about. Okay, thank you.
Well,
Can I just respond to this? Just so you know, that there's the roundtable has a multi-page response document. But in the primary recommendations, they have 48 recommendations, 21 of which have to do with departures. And about the equal number to do with arrivals, and then there's a couple miscellaneous ones. So absolutely, the roundtable, as you can well imagine, you know, the whole San Mateo County is, almost all of it's affected one way or the other about departure. So yeah, that's very, very important. And I want to just say one thing about the shifting noise things to make sure I was not misstating anything. I don't think anyone, well, don't want to say that. But I think that it would be well accepted for problem areas that were caused by NextGen that could go back to the old way, much like I explained earlier about that offshore departure that was used by like 15% of the flights. Going back to that is not shifting noise. Now, if you wanted to say, I want 100% of the flights to be flying that flight path instead of the original 15, well then you'd need to do some discussion and find out who does that affect. And that's what the roundtable does. They take apart and they have representatives from each of the cities, and someone will say, hey, you do it 100%, you're slamming my people. And so there's some give and take. But going back to the old way, that's not shifting noise in my book. That's just putting things back the way they used to be, the way they should be. Okay, so I just wanted to be clear about that.
And I guess another thing that you can answer is, well, why can't we just go back the way it was? You know, just put it back the way it was when they were more dissipated and they were more over the ocean. I mean, you basically say throw out NextGen, essentially.
Yeah, you know, is there any technical reason they can't do that? They could do anything they wanted to do, really. But it would be, but a lot has changed. It's just not the procedure, you know, one procedure or two procedures. It's 30, 40 procedures in the Bay Area, maybe more than that. And they all connect with each other, and they go over and above each other, and to go back is very difficult. Now, let's just say if Phoenix were to go back, that Phoenix Airport is basically 2 runways and no complications. They go east and west, and they go and they turn, they go and they turn. Simple. I mean, seems to me it would be simple for that to be fixed and go back for those people. But for us, it's very complex. Anything can be done, but it's just a matter of what leverage you have with the FAA to want to do it. And I don't think it's realistic to even think about that. I think what's realistic is to have, the roundtable has made recommendations that make big changes, big suggestions for big changes to the procedures that are established. And if we can get the FAA to buy into those and get those approved, I think you'll see some big differences. I think one of the big differences we kind of forget about the coast here, that maybe hasn't made clear, although Laszlo brought it up, and that is the fact that the procedure not only moved a little bit, because the tracks are somewhat similar, but the altitude over port has changed. And that's tremendously different, especially on departures. Those departures get very noisy. And so that before you had a procedure where you were crossing port, I think it was at or above 10,000, and now you're crossing it at 9 or below. So the at or below 10 from before, a lot of your flights could have been at 12 or 13, especially the ones coming from Oakland that had more time to climb. And so those, you know, I live under 11,000 foot traffic in my house, but it's arrival, so it's not so bad. But, you know, something at 13, 14,000 feet is, I'm going to hazard a guess and say not very disturbing to you. But at 9,000 feet, that's a different matter. So I think we have to also focus on the altitude, and I think that's something where the roundtable can make a difference. You know, and maybe on a shorter timeline than that 2 years. I'm throwing that out. Don't hold me to it. But I'm the eternal optimist in making changes. And as Supervisor Pine said, we have an FAA, the manager of procedures and planning for the local TRACON, the radar facility, is our liaison, is our technical advisor to the roundtable. And she is phenomenal. She's the one that worked a lot as you probably remember, on the other issue at San Carlos Airport and some of that. She's creative, she's realistic, she's good. We're very excited to have her and hope that she'll make not someone of her caliber. So, anyway, that's just, thank you. Did I answer any other questions?
I think you got it. Laszlo?
Yeah, maybe I try to summarize. The crux of the problem is that the FAA's mission statement emphasizes efficiency, safety, and a number of other things. It's absolutely no mention of the public, the non-flying public, and I think that Congressman Spire's office and Kathleen made a great service here by trying to induce the FAA to include in their mission statement something that would actually take also a view of the non-flying public, the noise pollution, and so forth. So that's a step in the right direction, because up to this point they really didn't give a damn about us. So that's one thing. To change the attitude of the FAA about Phoenix. So Phoenix was won by the city of Phoenix simply because the FAA did absolutely no environment impact report, no public outreach, no workshops, and so forth. Supervisor Pine is absolutely right about that. I venture to say that the same also applies to the Bay Area. Even though we have the so-called San Francisco Noise Roundtable, I don't necessarily think that that's a body that represents public input or replaces public workshops or any kind of a mass communication. It's a very small group of people who've been at it for 36 years without, frankly, a significant success, as you can tell. So the problem with the roundtable is that it did give a fig leaf to the FAA to say, well, I mean, we are talking about to the roundtable, so there is public input and there is communication. I don't think that's the case. We are very much similar to Phoenix in the sense that the FAA had broken several of their own rules, and therefore they are open to litigation in many ways. The noise shifting is one which is against FAA policies. The lack of environmental impact report, which they are not required to do, as Dave knows, who's a lawyer, but this is something that they have done many times before. So, in other words, the next gen was a really botched rollout, and I think that the communities who asked the FAA to roll back or revisit the whole next gen procedures are completely within their rights.
Thank you.
I then just want to state again that the points, all those points you made were raised by these individuals in Portola Valley and presented to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, and they disagreed with your assessment. They said no. They ruled differently than Phoenix. They said no, they did what they needed to do. They weren't arbitrary, they weren't capricious. In Phoenix, they ruled the other way. But they litigated the actual questions that you asked. That's why we are, that's one of the reasons Phoenix, it's not helpful for us now. It's been litigated by our very own Ninth Circuit. Those very questions you've asked have been litigated and decided. That's very difficult for us.
Would have to be a whole different issue. It's after 9:30, and I've kept the council from asking any questions or saying anything. Is it quick?
It's real quick. I just wanted to ask, since we were projecting a 2-year process, do you feel that the planes will be upgraded by 2 years so that they're less noisy?
The fleets are always changing. Right now, I mentioned Southwest Airlines phase out. Well, with the phase out comes in the new 737 MAX. So yes, it's changing constantly.
And the 747s from United are also going to be.
A350s and 787s.
And all of those go. Technology does sometimes help us. All right, council members, as I said, it's late. If you have something that's different than what's already said, great. If it's been already said, say you agree with it, I appreciate it. Dan was the first one, so let's start with Dan, we'll go around.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank all the community for, bringing passion here tonight and sharing, what you're really truly seeing at home, and also everybody involved in coming to see what we can do. I just want to say that we just need to keep pressure on, and I certainly think that it'd be a good idea for Aaron to be at the roundtable.
Thank you. Brandon, anything?
Well, I'm going to say that, I was kind of a, I didn't really know anything about the process, I didn't know where the planes would come from and stuff like that, but it is really interesting to see that, the flights are increasing every year, and that, I don't know, I just have this feeling that possibly in 2 years, there'll be a bit too little to be done, and then you have to have more complaints in 2 years because, the frequency of flights have increased, and so, I don't know how the future would look like, and what results are going to be accomplished, and, what actions are going to be taken, if any are going to be taken at all.
Chris?
First, want to thank Dave, Bert, and Kathleen. Really impressive testimony and information. That's the kind of stuff that really helps a community and a council figure out, the reality from the hash. This is a complex issue. I don't know anything about aviation, so to have these experts here helping was very useful. Thank you very much for that. Second, definitely a problem. I'm just going to pick out one statistic. 15,000 complaints to 3.5 million in 2 years. That's clear evidence that a change was made for the worse. I don't know how do you not look at that and move that on to the FAA and say, there's a problem here. There's a problem. That's not a 350 people signing a community petition. 3.5 million people, an increase of, almost 3.5 million, yes, in 2 years. That's pretty clear evidence of a change for the worse. 3, anecdotally, as everybody else, about a month ago, it was hot. We had the windows open upstairs. I'm a night owl, so I'm down in my office working. Go upstairs to use the restroom. And I thought there was like a drag race going out on Highway 1. Literally, I looked out my window, looks at Highway 1. What's going on out there? Nothing. Okay, so I go to the bathroom, and then here it is again. I'm like, wow, those darn I thought it was motorcyclists. Those darn motorcyclists. So now I'm standing looking out the window facing to the southeast here, and oh, it's a plane. Wow. And before I could even turn away, there's another one. No, this was sometime in the middle of the night. Just several, and I was taken aback because I usually don't have the window open. I'm usually not there to see that. I was really shocked at how loud it was. Literally, because we're about 300 yards from Highway 1. I thought it was people rumbling on Highway 1 doing their motorcycles and stuff. Fourth, the MCC, I personally am, as a member of the MCC, am considering authoring a letter similar to what City of Half Moon Bay did, and City of Pacifica. It's waiting till this meeting tonight. Also, I've seen many people from the community commenting on Nextdoor, so I knew this was an issue. This is one of the reasons why we wanted to have this forum tonight, so that we could get enough information so that to decide whether we want to write a letter and what would be in it. So I feel I have enough information. I'm going to be working on that. If anybody from the community would still like to give input on that, Chris Johnson _MCC@yahoo.com. Please send me an email. Be working on this in the next month or so. Hopefully it'll be out sooner than that. And lastly, I'm going to make 2 extremely cynical comments right now, so if you're sensitive to that, please leave the room. One is that we saw this, this efficiency thing, the planes being routed into a narrower thing. For me personally, as almost exclusively an end user of things, I don't own anything, I don't have real estate, I don't have an apartment, I don't have a business. For me, economies of scale never benefit the end user. Okay, economies of scale are for the owners of the product or service. It helps them. And here we have this yet again. This is not, I agree with what people have said, sir, in the back row. This is not helping me get to my destination any sooner because all of that extra time is sucked up in the gate and the security and in sitting on the runway waiting. So there's no efficiency there. Stop with that. That is not for us, and it's certainly not for the residents of the flyer over here. But the really cynical point here, and Bill made it, Aaron made it as well, is that Bert mentioned we don't know who actually made these decisions at the FCC, the FAA. Well, he said, there's a body of people, they went behind the curtain and some decisions were. So, but we know who made the decisions, okay? We know and how the decision was made. And those are the same entities that make decisions on most federal regulations these days, who actually write the decisions into the proposed law that's handed to the legislature. And that is the corporations and their lobbyists. And I feel strongly that that was the case here as well. What we've got and the information we've presented, efficiency, emissions, yes, those are beneficial byproducts and those are nice talking points on the PR. But this was about the airlines and their profits. Okay, and so these decisions, the whole efficiency thing is about the airlines' profits. So for me personally, and hearing that the county has no ability to make change, the MCC certainly doesn't, probably not even the state, even the group that we have meeting, the roundtable, it's the FAA, they have the power to do that. So I would say the person that I want to petition, the person that I will petition, is the airlines. Petition the CEOs of these airlines with your words and your dollars, because that's the only thing that matters here, is the dollars here. And there's not going to be any significant change unless there's a financial impact here. The airlines have received their financial impact, and they're fine with it now. So, and I would also say to people, that means you can't have it both ways as well, and I'm speaking to myself as well. You can't enjoy an easy flight to Las Vegas for that fun weekend, but then complain that there's more flights. So you can't have it both ways. I personally feel that the entities that I direct my ire to on this are the airlines themselves. They're making the huge profits, not us, not the FAA, and certainly not these great folks that came here tonight to present this to us. Thank you for the roundtable. Supervisor Pine, thank you for your contributions to Bert, great information. Kathleen, thank you for what you're doing as well.
I just want to echo what everyone has said. This is a very impressive presentation, really well coordinated, and a lot of expertise, which all of us needed to hear. I think we're all really lucky to be here, and I'm one of the people that's lucky enough to be able to hear the surf at night, which many of us can. And I've noticed, it doesn't bother me so much during the day, but if I'm listening to the surf at night and I'm trying to relax and trying to go to sleep, the frequency, not the density, but the sound frequency of the airplanes is almost the same as the surf frequency. And so you're listening to the surf come and go and come and go, and the airplanes are coming and going with just about the same frequency, once again, as the surf. It really is very disturbing. And I realize that's kind of a complaint that most people would die to have, but it does bother me.
I won't bother to say anything other than thanks to everybody who presented and everybody who spoke up tonight. I think I share a lot of concerns. I hear the noise in my backyard. I'm lucky enough to have double pane windows, so when the windows are closed, I hardly hear it, but then the windows are closed, so. Anyway, I do want to really thank you, Bert and Dave and Kathleen for the huge effort.
Thank you, Aaron.
And with that, I think I am going to adjourn this meeting.
Oh, Dave, I'm sorry. Oh, you know what? I have meetings attended information, but I gave that to Claire.
We didn't put them on the agenda for tonight because we knew it was going to be a long meeting.
No
So
worries.
they'll all be on the next meeting.
And
Sounds
please
good.
thank Lisa as well for working to facilitate the
We'll do
presentation.
that. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, committee.